afternoon, Milwaukee. This is the Bart Belling Late Afternoon Show on News Talk 1130 WISN. Just thought about the number of things that I saw just over the last few days that I have never seen before in my life. Which got me to thinking, you hear these people say, now I've seen everything. You've heard people say that, right? Now I've seen everything. You know what the key is to actually being able to say that you've seen everything? Well, I don't know. I don't like your answer. I'm trying to think of why your answer's stupid. He said you actually see everything. That's not the answer, but I don't know why it's not the answer. I've got a better answer. No, the key to being able to say that you've seen everything is you have to live long enough to see everything. For instance, if I had croaked when I had my stroke, look at the number of things that I would not have seen. And therefore, since those things have happened, I would not have seen everything. Now, here's the thing. What if you've seen everything that's happened to the point that you are at? For instance, if there are things that haven't happened yet, how would you know you haven't seen them? You see what I'm saying? You do? Because what I just said sounded insane. Like if something hasn't happened, how would you know you haven't seen it? Because if it's never happened, it wouldn't occur to you that it would be a thing that hasn't happened. You know what I'm saying? That's like, I think of like certain guys that I've seen hit on women and I've never seen them get anywhere. That I can say I've never saw it happen because I saw it attempt to occur. But for example, if the sun just tomorrow rose in the west, it would not occur to me that that's something that I've missed out that hasn't happened because I just assumed that that somehow could not. Maybe that'll be the next thing that happen. We'll just start the planet will start reversing itself and everything will come upside. Can you rule anything out? It's that thing about when I was back in college, the upside down globe was a big thing. That was one of the first claims that we live in a racist world. Well, the lefties who were claiming everything was racist were not as effective at it back then as they were now, but they claimed that the globe was upside down. And theoretically, the globe is upside down because the globe can't be either upside down or right side up. Every globe you've ever seen, though, North America and Europe are on the top half of the globe, and South America and Australia and most of Africa are on the bottom half of the globe, right? Well, it is a fair question. Why is that? When you're out there in space, North America's not up and South America's not down because there's no up nor down in space. We're just a ball that's out there. So when you show this globe in which they flip everything around, it would freak people out. They just could not get used to it. And the only reason they couldn't get used to it is we've always seen the globe in a certain way. And the globe in it's like, think about it. If somebody says they went up north, the only reason we say up north because on a map north is up, but theoretically the map could be reversed. There's no reason that it has to be the way that it is because we're talking about concepts of space. I find these things kind of fascinating. Anyway, back when I was in college, there were people who were arguing that this is like the first time I was exposed to people claiming white entitlement and Western dominated culture and so on, that somehow we made the globe to put us on the north and mostly nations that were filled with people of color on the bottom. Now, I don't remember if I argued this, but I think I would have said, well, Australia, they're white. They're not at the bottom. How can you claim that? I might have said that or I might not have. I don't know. But also, I love this. I couldn't think of any upside for us to be on the up. What difference would it make if we were down there on the bottom, right? Generally speaking, wouldn't you rather, whenever you think of geography, isn't going south always better than north? When you go north, you're thinking of like igloos and freezing and all of this. When you're thinking of Florida, south, you're thinking of like sitting on the beach in Jamaica or in warm weather, right? So I don't know that it did anything to do with white privilege other than that when they did the first globe, they had to figure out how to do it that way. I wonder who came up with the first globe. You could go, yeah, I'm sure you would then get it wrong. If there actually was a fact on Google, Google will have taken it off by now. There's no point in bringing that story up other than I was going to make my thing about seeing everything and so on. Just over the weekend, though, I just think of the number of things that I saw that I'm pretty sure that I've never seen before, and it really wouldn't have dawned on me that I ever would see them. I don't think I need to even go through a list because everybody has 90 things like that now, right? How many things can you? I bet almost everybody in the United States saw something this weekend that they've never seen before. Just given how weird and goofy, how many people would have ever envisioned that you would live in a country in which regular old Americans, for just saying things that on their face seem to not even be controversial, can have their lives ruined? How many people would have thought that you would have had, say, a situation like Tosa, where the police department are walking around with like parasols and ignoring people that are screaming in their faces and just doing, I swear right now, Wauwatosa's police department is a bunch of zombies. That's what I think. They've been zombieized by the politicians there, that they have to sit back and take the kind of abuse that just try to imagine me taking that abuse for as long as they're standing there and taking it 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 and taking it, because it's just, we've apparently come to the conclusion that you can be the most horribly rude-mannered, despicable, awful person toward another human being if you are a liberal. And if the person that's on the receiving end is a cop, you can literally say or do anything. Who would have thought? I mean, it does not seem that long ago in my life where the person who was standing there saying nothing and being meek was like the regular person, and the person yelling at you with the attitude and screaming and yelling was the cop. That's been most of my life, right? Those are the good old. Who even knew they were the good old days? That's the problem with the good old days. If we would have known they were the good old days, we would have enjoyed them back when they were the good old days. We didn't know they were the good old days. We didn't know everything would get worse. There was a guy, I won't say exactly where he worked, but there was a cop who always seemed to work the entrance at one of the public places around here in southeastern Wisconsin, and I swear, he just loved barking at you if you weren't in the right lane or whatever. And I've always told police officers this: one of the reasons why, when your backs are against the wall, say the Sterling Brown situation or something, and some people will turn on you, is because a lot of people have encounters with cops in which we're not crooks. We're not committing rape. We're not even doing anything. And the cop just comes across with way more attitude that's necessary. And this does come back to haunt you, because people remember this, and they assume that every police officer is like that because one guy was walking around like a blowharded, you know what? I've just always attributed to short man syndrome. That's been, I say this as somebody who's tall. When you're tall, you can make fun of people who have short man syndrome, right? No, but I'm telling you, the shorter the cop, the likelier the attitude. But I say that's not unique to cops. Wouldn't you say in general, the shorter the person, the likelier there's going to be that there's an attitude? That's why any of these things that become a thing, they become a thing because they have some basis in reality, and probably short people have been ignored, so therefore they feel the need. And I get the whole thing with police officers. They say, look, and the point they've tried to explain to me, look, when they come over on a traffic stop where they assert the authority, and this is the point I've tried to make to African Americans, you think this attitude is, you're the only ones receiving it, and you get this attitude because you're black. No, that's the attitude we all get. Cop pulls you over, a cop sees, says, is there any reason why? That's how they are. And I get why they are. They have to immediately come on a little intimidating to establish control of the situation. That's just an important thing in life. It is how they're trained. And there's a reason, as I say, they have to make it clear who the alpha male is, who's the leader of the pack, who's the big dog. What are the other ones here? Who's in charge? And if they come across you, let's imagine you are a bad guy. I'll give you a perfect example. You have to have seen it to see. Now, you all know that Fargo not only is a movie, it's a TV show. You know that, don't you? Oh, you've seen both. Now, but you've not seen every season of the TV show, have you? Oh, you're a weasel here. You lie. You just lie. No, there's three. Yeah, I know you didn't see that. Well, no, that's the other thing. It's like when you say, well, I've seen it all. How do you, going back to how do you know that you've seen it all? Maybe there's one that you don't know existed. It's every year is succeedingly better. That's been my thing. The Ted Danson year, that was the middle year. I just go by who the cop is. That's my way of, figuring it out. Well, anyway, one of the seasons of the TV show of Fargo, not to be confused with the movie. And the thing that makes it even weirder is the TV show, it's a different story every year, but it has similarities to the movie. There's always a connection between Minnesota. There's always a cop, usually a female from Minnesota that's part of it. There's always a connection to North Dakota. They somehow always have to have a little bit of an arm's length thing to Fargo. Everybody's always weird. They all talk like people from Minnesota, but the stories are different. And there's blood, all massive death, just like in the movie. So those themes run together, but the stories are different. And the TV show is just brilliant. Noah Hawley does the TV show, and the Coen brothers did the movie. Well, in the first season of the TV show, the story is taking too long. But is there anything I do that doesn't take too long? Really? You just said, yeah, there are. This is taking too long. Admit it, this is taking too long. Well, in fact, I think it's taking too long. Me asking whether or not it's taking too long is taking too long, correct? I find this amusing. Is this amusing or not? Well, I mean, you think the mayor of Oak Creek is doing this? If he was, if he could carry on and rip about nothing like this. He talks about nothing as it is, but if he could do it in an entertaining fashion, he wouldn't be, he wouldn't be have the worst talk show in the city. What? Yeah, or whatever, or wherever he is down there. I thank God for those sports stations, though, right? You know why they exist, Paul? So nobody at any other station can worry about being in last place. Why is that not seemingly correct? I mean, I swear, it's just weird to me that we have 2 country stations and 42 sports stations. Isn't that just a weird thing? It's just a lot in radio is very, very weird. It's also weird that there's only one conservative talk station. That has been explained. It's got a lot to do with not the fact that it isn't an incredibly successful format. WTMJ had it in its format and it bailed on it. It's just that there are companies that don't want to mess with it. They would rather literally be unsuccessful than deal with all of the problems associated with doing something that liberals are allowed to shove you around on. Your belief is that the problem with radio is that it's the problem that I've cited with podcasting or anything else. People say, well, what is podcasting going to make it? People who are very good at a podcast will make it, and people who are very bad won't. It's like saying, do you like art? Well, some people's art is terrible and other art is brilliant. Do you like music? Well, I guess it kind of depends on whose music it is that you're referencing. The problem with radio stations playing music is that you can get music in 9 million different forms. With regard to music, you can get talk radio in 9 different, but you can only get you can only get Sean Hannity in certain places. You can only get Levin or Dan O'Donnell or me in certain places. And if you have individual talent, that will always, whatever the way this stuff shakes out, that's going to rule forever. So anyway, among the things that I don't think I've ever seen before, I don't believe, I may be wrong, I'm pretty sure I've never seen a guy on the final day of a major golf championship hit a hole-in-one and then go on to win the tournament. You'll see if you're watching, say, the U.S. Open, some guy just play, he's 30 shots back. They'll show, okay, here so-and-so was at the 15th and he hits a hole-in-one. I've never seen a guy hit a hole-in-one on the final day of a major when he was also the winner of the tournament. I still think the greatest, I've seen incredible golf shots. Who was the guy that chipped in to win the Masters back in the 80s? Boy, I should remember that. I still think the greatest shot I ever saw was Jack Nicklaus at Pebble Beach the year that he won the United States Open when he bounced his tee shot off the pin. I've seen some really, really good ones and really spectacular ones over the years, but I mean, Jerry Kelly hit a hole-in-one on the final day of the Senior PGA Championship, and he went on to win the event. I mean, you know what is so weird? And this is where I get into the things that I've never seen before. People ask all the time, well, some people say they can't stand watching sports without the fans, that it's too weird. I think it's less good, but how much do you think it takes away from it for you? Depends on the sport. Paul said golf, and I was just going to say that this is where it totally took it away. It totally, because if a guy gets a hole-in-one, what happens? Everybody's going crazy. Well, Kelly hits a hole in one, and you hear like his caddy and nobody else, so there's no reaction. Like a couple of weeks ago, what was the major that we just had a couple of weeks ago? Did they what? The PGA? This was not the senior, but just the regular PGA. The young guy whose name I already forget who won the PGA. Yeah, I mean, whatever. He just like nodded his head when he won it. Had he sunk that putt and now it's over, the crowd, 20,000, 10,000 people at the green, they're all roaring. So, of course, you do the fist pump. It's hard to do a fist pump when there's nobody there. So, I mean, I thought I lost something if Kelly's getting the hole in one. Jerry Kelly's one of that. You get a few cases like this where it's not that he got better when he got old. It's that he didn't get worse. And the key to winning on the senior tour is that you have to not get way worse than you were when you were younger. And Jerry Kelly, I mean, when he was on the regular PGA tour, he couldn't win anything. He'd be down there. These stories in the Wisconsin media, they say that, okay, Skip Kendall shot a 97 and Jerry Kelly shot a 92. And they'd be down at the bottom. And now he's out there on the Champions Tour, which is what they call the senior tour now. And he's a contender every time. I'm not sure of this. I believe this is his first major. I believe it's the first time he's won a major. But Jerry Kelly of Madison won the senior PGA and hit a hole in one. And they played it at Firestone. Now, I do know all about Firestone. The golf course. Do you know where Firestone Golf Course is? You should be able to figure it out. Don't look it up, you little weasel. Tell you now you might be able to figure it out, but you would have to know something. See, it's in Akron. Now you'd know that because that's where they're from. But that golf course, here's why I know it. You got to be old to know this story, but I guarantee you there are some people who are going to know this story. There was a TV show back in the 60s. And I don't remember the name of it. It was something like CBS Golf Spectacular or something. What they did is they had match play events in which they had two-man teams running against one another. And they played it at Firestone. And this thing was on for years. Now, it was taped in advance because obviously the guys had hit their tee shots. And then the next thing you know, they'd fast forward the tape. So they're up there hitting the second shots and so on. It was either 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. And I think it was 2-on-2. This is back in the day in which there's no sports on TV. We only have 3 or 4 channels that are out there. This thing was taped. I think it was on a Saturday afternoon. They generally pair like really, Jack Nicklaus, brother Arnold Palmer and Gary Player might be one team and Billy Casper and somebody else would be another thing. And they always played that thing at Firestone. So every single week I turned on the TV, there was a tournament at Firestone. I remember Firestone. So that's a big deal of a course. So Jerry Kelly won a major and he hit a hole in one, I think on the 12th. Yeah, I saw it. I mean, I saw it. And that was one of the things in which I thought, okay, this is something I've never seen before. If somebody's ever hit a hole in one on the final day that they've won a major, I don't think I've ever seen that before. And then the whole thing of not having crowds there. Then there are the other things in which you have seen things before, but you don't know if they're good or bad. For instance, I made the comment on Thursday night. Last time I was here was Thursday, as you recall. You recall that, right? You recall that I wasn't here on Friday. You know that I don't work on Fridays. You know about this now? You picked up on that. Well, this is how long the weekend was. Thursday night, the Brewers are playing the Cubs. I had somebody ask me, are they the only team you're going to play all year? Apparently not knowing that, in fact, they actually almost are the only. You know what the problem is? Because St. Louis, you only play your division and then the American League division. Like, we play the National League Central and the American League Central. That's the way it works this year. But then, like, the Cardinals aren't playing, so you knock them out of the thing. They finally, I think, played a couple of games over the weekend. Did you see that? Their doubleheaders are 7 innings. Well, why? It's a shortened season, so, well, then why not make all the games 7 innings and whiz through it? That would solve the problem of 3.5-hour games. Just take it down to 7 innings, right? I wouldn't be against that. Go to 7 innings, right? The runner at second, yeah, but that's permanent, isn't it? I don't know. So anyway, the Brewers played the Cubs on Thursday night, and maybe you don't recall this. Thursday is like 9 million years ago. The Cub pitcher, Yu Darvish, looked like he might throw a no-hitter. This was not looking good. The only thing going for us is the Cubs manager. Now, I keep wanting to say that it's still the moron who everybody thought was a genius with the beard down there. He's gone. Now, what was his name? The guy they had for the last number of years. The Pete Carroll of baseball. Come on. Yeah, who's the most obnoxious manager in baseball? The guy that was managing the Cubs. I can't think of his name either. Well, now they got Ross, the catcher who retired like 3 weeks ago. He's the manager. I could see they were just itching that they were going to pull the guy out with a pitch because of the pitch count, even though he had a no-hitter. Joe Madden, yeah. Well, he wasn't there. I wanted it to be Madden, so when he actually pulled the guy out with the no-hitter, I could say, see what a moron Madden is. That just shows you how anal sports now is. To take a pitcher out, that should be a federal crime, don't you think? If a pitcher has a no-hitter, you should not be allowed to take him out. I don't care how high his pitch count is, right? We agree. Well, so the Brewers are going, they're losing like 4-0. At worst, Yu Darvish has a no-hitter going. Well, then Smoke hits a home run. Well, good. I can at least say there's not a no-hitter. But the Brewers went on to lose the game. They actually almost won it in the ninth inning. They almost came all the way back, but they didn't. But during the game, I did find a silver lining. I said, I'm not in favor of any of this. Don't let fans go to things and shut everything down. But there is an upside in watching a game at Wrigley Field without seeing 40,000 drunken Cub fans sitting there. Don't you admit that it's sort of more pleasant to see a game at Wrigley Field when there's no actual Cub fans there? Well, yeah, I'm not counting the ones that, just think about that. Doesn't that just show you how insane our COVID thing is? You can sit packed together on a rooftop building across the street and 25 stories up in the air, but you can't scatter people in a 40,000 seat stadium. So what's your opinion? You'd rather see Wrigley Field empty than Wrigley Field with obnoxious Cubs fans. Well, I say this, and I said this Thursday because the Brewers lost. Then it comes back and flips on me. I would denied the opportunity Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to see those Cubs fans sit there and have to watch the Brewers win every single game. And what's beautiful about it is the Cubs had the last bat in every one of those games, and they lost every one of them by 1 run. So they would have sat there right to the bitter end, and we would have watched them have to go away disappointed as Josh Hader or Claudio got the strikeout in one game. And well, yeah, wouldn't it have been the Hader at bat where he threw in 97 pitches and then he finally got it never works that way. The more pitches there are to a hitter, I always claim it helps the hitter. In fact, the guy actually hit the ball really hard and on the button, but it was right at somebody. So the Brewers won the last 3 games. So we didn't even get that of seeing Cubs fans having to walk out all dejected and being upset. And that's an important series for the Brewers. If not, because, see, the standings don't matter. People don't get that this year. The standings don't matter. Your record matters. You have the top 16 teams make the playoffs. And the reason it's important to beat a good team is you're likelier to lose to a good team than a bad team. And the Cubs were 13-3 going in. And there was every reason to believe the Brewers could lose 3 out of 4. They didn't. They won 3 out of 4. But all were just kind of halfway decent games. All right, now we've got a lot that we're going to be talking about. There are other things I could go into that I would say of the things that I haven't seen before. The thing that's just most startling is seeing the loss of our freedom and our rights and the loss and the lack of authority and order in American cities. I mean, I was a kid in the 60s and there were riots then, and we all remember the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles 25 years ago. And there were cities that burned in the 70s, but this is all different. At least then the authorities were trying to stop it. When we saw the riots in the 60s and the 70s and the insurrection in the street, the authorities at least were trying to stop it, and people did it anyway. The difference now is that you see insurrection going on and the authorities don't do anything to stop it. And it's just a foreign experience for me that even in liberal cities that you would just see. Well, Chicago's a perfect example of just imagining that. I mean, in the 60s, there were riots in Chicago, and there were big riots during the Democratic National Convention. And in that instance, you could even make the case it was the police that were rioting. They just went in and clubbed everybody around that they could find. Now, the Chicago police would simply stand back and do nothing as people bust up hundreds of stores and loot things and do it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. I can't actually say that I ever would have thought that we would have gone so far as a country in rejecting authority that liberal communities would do this to themselves. And the reason I guess I would not have thought that is there's nothing in it for the liberal power structure of Chicago to allow Chicago to be destroyed. It's not even a logical response. Seattle, the lefties who live in Seattle, they all love Seattle. There's nothing in it for them to have their city destroyed. Same thing with Portland. Finally, when Madison finally said enough is enough the night that they tried to firebomb the city county building, which is the jail, and Carpenter was almost killed, there was an enough is enough response, but it surprised me that we haven't had that enough is enough response really anywhere else. And I just, as much of a pessimist as I can be about some certain social trends, I would not have thought it would have gone as far as it's gone, as fast as it has happened. I look at a situation like Chicago. You know, I've been to downtown Chicago. I can't even count the number of times in my life. And it's always, of course, been a Democratic city and all of that. It's beyond my recognition that all these people, some of whom I know some big shots in Chicago, that they would be sitting back and allowing this to happen. And I think many Americans are just stunned by the whole thing. In the meantime, while we have shown such incredible tolerance toward liberals and insurrectionists, we have shown total intolerance to anyone who is conservative from being able to speak or do anything at all. Which leads to a story that I'm going to share here, and I'm going to attempt to be fair here. What? Oh, yeah, I'll do the word. 3 o'clock word. Are people bitching about this? Yeah, well, good. What if I just didn't do it? I can do whatever I want. Here's the word. I probably should have done it before this. This is Paul's fault. If the word is not given out at your satisfaction, it's Paul's fault. And if the word is given out at your satisfaction, that's because I did it at the right time. What? You don't like those? You don't like those rules? Don't you think that's how I kind of worked with? Well, it's the whole Pete Carroll, Darrell Bevell thing. Who actually called that pass play on 1st and goal and the one in the Super Bowl? You know what I'm saying? What? Well, you know, if Pete Carroll could get away with putting this all on Darrell Bevell, he would have done that. And, you know, he's implied it was Darrell Bevell. I know this. Pete Carroll's got those headphones on all the time, and unless he swallowed the chewing gum and couldn't get the words out, whoever called the play, if he didn't like it, he could have overruled it. Plus, I don't dislike Darrell Bevell, and I can't stand Pete Carroll, so I want that to be on him. The word is home, H-O-M-E, home. After 4, text that into 200-200. You get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio info, standard data, and message rates apply in this nationwide contest. Now, it's not been real easy to get all sides of the following story because one side isn't talking. I do want to tell you that in my long experience of poking into things, which is now decades and decades and decades and decades and half of another one. I think I got that correct. When somebody doesn't want to tell their side and somebody else does, it's usually because the side that doesn't want to tell their side has something to hide. Not always. I said usually. Just think back to, well, you're a parent. You are a parent, right? If something bad happened and you think that one of your kids might have had something to do with it, can't you normally tell when they want to talk like crazy, you know, so-and-so down the street or something did it, that it's usually when they don't want to say anything about it? Isn't that usually a sign of guilt? Is it not usually a sign of guilt when you don't want to tell me something that I'm asking about? Aren't you usually trying to cover something up? Usually, yes. Not always. Sometimes you're covering for a friend. But in other words, usually if you're not talking, you're trying to cover something up. Usually. That doesn't mean that's the case here. I'm just saying. There was an event held over the weekend. There's this movement out there called Walk Away. And it's kind of come out of millennials because they'd be the ones that would walk away. It's the notion of walking away. Very similar to what Candace Owens has started among black people called Blexit, where she's encouraging black people to exit the Democratic Party. That walk away or hashtag walk away is a movement to get people to finally walk away from the Democratic Party. And what they do, and most of the people who are involved in this are people who They've been a Democrat just because they always were a Democrat, and then something eventually, it's like the red pill, blue pill thing that we talk about. Something happens. And whatever the Democratic thing was either went too far or something happened on the Republican side that makes sense to them. Their mind is open up, and then they start thinking it through. And then they ultimately take that final step of, I'm just going to walk away. It is very common and has been for really 80 years in America for people in their 20s to walk away. Generally speaking, throughout history, you tend to be more liberal when you're young than when you're old. Some cases you can get really old and nothing kicks in. Like, say, Bernie Sanders is just as big a commie now as he was before. But often people will be given an idealistic view of life. And then they get into the world and start experiencing life and realize that a lot of the things that they were told are stupid and don't make any sense. I would be in that category. I mean, just about everybody I knew back in the era that I went to college would have described themselves as a liberal, nowhere near as soft-headed as today's liberals, but would have thought of themselves as left of center. And some stayed, and others had the experience that I had that gradually, and I've told the story a million times and I won't bore you again, where you go through this process of starting to question some of these things, and eventually you question all of it, and you end up with an ideology that is very different than the one that you had before. Well, that's what this whole walk away movement is. And they hold these things around the country all over the place, and it's basically for, generally speaking, the people are younger, 20s and 30s, that are involved in this. And the person who was the main speaker for this event is Karlin Borisenko. Now, you may recall that name. She wrote an essay and did a video a number of months ago. And she posted the essay on an online publication, and we put it up on Belling.com. This is months ago, but like not a long time ago. In which she talked to, I believe it was before the COVID thing, though, because it was when Trump was still holding the rallies. She described herself as being a classic liberal and liberal on this, that, and the other thing. And in her essay, she talked about how she went to a Trump rally and how blown away she was that everything she had been told by all of her friends, the media, and everyone else about Trump rallies and Trump supporters were in fact not true. She said she had never seen such a more loving, warm, welcoming, and supportive group of people. She thought it was rather diverse. Not only were people extremely polite, they seemed to be bent over backwards to be friendly and outgoing. And it also struck her that they weren't monolithic, where they all agreed with Trump on it. Everybody didn't have the same position. But in fact, people actually were talking and discussing issues, sometimes disagreeing, but never in a hateful way. And this got her to thinking. And it's, what the Trump movement and Trump supporters are being portrayed as simply was wrong. And there were a couple of other issues that she had hang-ups on, and where liberals have just said extreme things and so on. And she points out that going to that Trump rally was the moment at which her attitudes and her philosophy started to change. She wrote a long essay that appeared in an online publication, and it just got a lot of reaction. And it's now like, I talk about a lot where these TV shows, back in the day, something was on TV, MASH is on Monday night in 1975 or whatever it is, and people would talk about it Tuesday morning because that was the only time it was on. Now, things live on forever in Netflix and Hulu and Prime Video. Some show may be like, some people are watching Breaking Bad right now for the first time. Well, the same thing is true with regard to these essays that appear online. Back when a magazine would come out, if something was in Time magazine on Saturday, everybody would have read it by Tuesday that was going to read it. Now people will stumble across it now, and somebody will send me even now. Mark, you ought to talk about this. Well, we did 9 months ago or whatever it was when it was. Anyway, Karlin Borisenko is the woman who was the main presenter for this event this weekend. As she tells the story, she went to check in at the Ingleside Hotel in Pewaukee late afternoon on Friday. She wears a MAGA mask. Her face mask says, "Make America Great Again." And she said she admits that she likes to wear the mask because she admits seeing the reactions that people get when they see it. And she said from the moment that she walked into the hotel, she could see that there was an attitude. Now, I will give you this before we go any farther. If you know in advance that wearing something is going to result in an attitude occurring, you probably shouldn't be so shocked when you get the attitude that you're trying to provoke in the first place. And I say this a lot of these lefties that try to create some offensive art, and then they get upset when people are offended by the thing that they created for the purpose of being offended. So she said she got nothing but attitude from the moment that she checked in. And if you're wondering which hotel the Ingleside is, this is the old Country Springs, which it's that big, long, sprawling thing that goes on forever and ever and ever right on the north side of I-94 as you run through Waukesha County. It's now a water park and all of this stuff. It's the one that's out there. It's now called the Ingleside. She said she got attitude from the moment that she checked in. She said they then gave her more attitude that they were demanding that she put on one of these wristbands right away. And I get the whole thing, especially with COVID and with hotel security. They probably don't want guests coming in from outside, so they want you to have the wristband on. Anybody who knows anything about I can't stand wristbands. I can't stand these wristbands either. When you go to a Bucks game, they make you put a wristband on. The first thing I try to do the instant the game is over, I want to get that damn thing off. I don't know why it's annoying. Well, she didn't want to put the wristband on, and they're telling her she has to put the wristband on. And she's like, I'm going straight to my room. Why do I have to put the wristband on now, etc. And then she said, well, then she wanted to walk around and tour the place. So already there is trouble. And again, this is by her own description of what occurred. Now, here's the thing about this story. The hotel is a water park. I haven't done any real traveling this year because there's nowhere to go. But there is I have some basic Mark Belling rules of travel. Never, ever check into a hotel that has a water park unless you have kids who are going to the water park. If you are not somebody who intends to use a water park, never, ever, ever check into a hotel that has a water park. To me, that's just an absolute bait. Everybody has their various rules of traveling. That's on my list. Hotels that have water parks are going to be crowded with kids. And hotels that are crowded with kids tend to be loud all night because kids are bored. It's 8 o'clock at night. They have nothing to do. The hotel rooms are these little cubby holes. They go running around up and down the halls, yelling and screaming. It's just, hotels like this are a mess. The one thing you can't control is I try to avoid hotels that have like a big youth hockey tournament or baseball tournament over the weekend where you got the same thing. But the water park thing is nightmarish. Worse, many of the hotels that have water parks, the rooms are very close to the water parks. So she checked into a hotel, and I don't know if the conference organizers is how this got booked, but she checked into a hotel that had a water park. So now here's the backdrop, and we'll pick up the story after the break. She checks into the hotel. She said she got attitude from the beginning, and she believes it's because she had the Trump mask on, the MAGA mask. Then they start getting all over her because some anally retentive clerk is upset that she doesn't put the wristband on right away. She's been traveling all day. She's tired. I get that. I've had that too. For whatever reason, even though you're doing nothing, sitting on a plane and transferring, it can wear me out, and I'm exhausted, and I get headaches when I fly. You're crabby at the nights that, I mean, when we had my cruises, the people who could just get off the thing and immediately, I just don't know how they could do that. I needed hours just to recover from the experience. What are you like? Do you need to take hours to veg out? Or like the instant you land in Las Vegas, can you be out gambling 3 minutes later? I can't. I don't like it. It's yeah. So, and it's in the evening. So and the hotel is, as I say, a water park thing. The story disintegrates and deteriorates from here. She believes she was thrown out of the hotel because she was wearing a Trump mask. And she's posted on social media about it. And she makes the strong case that the Ingleside Hotel has employees who targeted her specifically because she's a Trump supporter. there would be a time in which I would think that's far-fetched. Those times are long gone. You have a glorified goon squad running the Germantown School District right now out there trying to find comments that somebody makes because on the grounds, well, a student might be offended. As if teachers now and coaches have some responsibility not to offend students. You have a basketball announcer of 27 years fired because he posts All Lives Matter. So I don't find anything far-fetched. And is it possible that the Ingleside targeted this woman because of this and treated her terribly because she had a Trump? Absolutely, it is possible. But that also means it's actually possible that none of this had anything to do with the treatment that she got. So I'm going to pick up at that point in a moment. News Talk 1130 WISN. Mark Ellen, late afternoon show forecast. For the first few days of this week, a few clouds tonight. We might actually cross below 60 down to about 58. Tomorrow, mostly sunny, high 74. A little bit warmer for the rest of the week. Sunny Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday's high 77, Thursday 78. Friday might get back over 80 degrees. Carolyn Borisenko is kind of a big deal right now in sort of younger conservative circles because she got a following after she wrote this essay about how she went to a Trump rally and changed her life. And she was in the area over the weekend to put on a presentation for this walkaway movement. And she checked in late Friday afternoon to the Ingleside Hotel, which is the old Country Springs in Pewaukee, and claims that she was greeted with attitude from the beginning. They didn't like her mask and she could just kind of tell, and she seemed to be targeted. Put this wristband on now, etc. All right, she gets to her room. She says the place is up for grabs with noise. In defense of the hotel, I'd never stay at that hotel. I just wouldn't. I'm not going to stay at a water park. Now, maybe if there's a conference there and I'm part of the conference and I'm from out of town, you want to stay at the hotel that it's in. I just avoid places with a water park like the plague because they're A, loud, B, they're filled with kids, and C, they're priority. I mean, I want a hotel to be quiet and comfortable. That's not the priority of a water park. They don't make them to be quiet and comfortable. Paul said he's been there at least a dozen times. Used to play there every New Year's Eve. You ever had to stay overnight there? Always did when the bands did, but New Year's Eve's more of an adult thing. Have you ever stay there? Just imagine that. Yeah, it sounds like chaotic, right? One big noise. Okay, so she's in the wrong place to begin with. Well, it's loud. According to her version of events, she contacted the front desk and asked if they were going to do anything to quiet things down. The hotel has a different version of events. The hotel says it received numerous complaints from individuals that she was running up and down the hallway of the hotel, banging on doors and yelling and berating people. She says she never left her room. She says she was doing some social media posting and talking to a couple of other conservative friends that she has on the phone during this time. She said she was as tired as could be. Their version of events was there was banging on the doors. Now, getting their version of events has been difficult, and I should point out that the Ingleside Hotel has done everything in its power to avoid answering questions. And the general manager of the hotel has specifically said he will not answer any of my questions. They have put out a brief statement. I'm going to share more information here that comes from somebody else who was in the hotel at a moment. But the hotel management itself is not responding to questions because obviously I would have a lot of them, including, do you have security camera video of the hallway, which would indicate whether or not she was doing the things that were said to occur. Anyway, this came to a head, and she says late at night, sometime between 11 and midnight, they came banging on the door and threw her out of the hotel. They ordered her to leave the hotel. Now, again, I have a pretty good sense for things like this, and it would seem to me to be rather extreme to throw somebody out of a water park hotel because they tend to just be what they are. Also, I can tell you that hotels that are located along the interstate have a tendency to have more issues than others just because big groups of people can just pull over and say, there's all what they are. She said that she never left the hotel room. She was shocked that they asked her to leave, but she gathered her stuff. She's tried to make arrangements to book another room somewhere and see if she can't get a ride. Remember, it's late at night. The hotel is, if you know the area, I think Gulf Road's the little frontage road that it's off of, but it's, if you go along I-94 in Waukesha County, there's some interchanges that have a zillion things. This isn't one of them. Basically, what's there is this. You go a little bit farther north and a little bit farther south. You go south, you go into, by the way, the hotel has an address, if this becomes a point. The address is Pewaukee, but it's actually in the city of Waukesha. This happens a lot out there, that your address isn't the same as where you are. It's within the governing city limits of the city of Waukesha. The borderline's got to be just a few feet away because it is north of I-94. So anyway, they order her to get out of the hotel, and she's trying to make arrangements for another place. So she stands in front of the hotel outside, and she says a security guard came and said, "You can't even stand on the property." They made her walk all the way out to the frontage road. It's now near midnight. A woman by herself at midnight having to stand out there until her ride could come. She has posted a lengthy video on one of her social media pages, and it's gotten a lot of views and a lot of people are talking about it. I became aware of this on Saturday night, and I contacted the hotel. I was told that the hotel's marketing manager would get back to me that night. No one ever did. No one contacted me on Sunday, nothing on Monday. Not surprisingly, even though the story was taking off all over social media, there was no local media coverage of it. My guess is that most of these brain-dead little 25-year-old nitwits who work in local television don't even know what the walkaway movement is, much less that Karlin Borisenko is here. The story gets more complicated. On Saturday, the hotel got a bunch of robo-bomb threats. That's when somebody uses these telephone programs to try to mask where the call is coming from and make, was this somebody who saw that Karlin posted on here? Was this, don't know. But again, this is long after she left. She believes she was thrown out of the hotel and got all of this treatment because they didn't like the fact that she was a Trump supporter. The hotel, as I say, has done everything in its power to avoid answering my questions. Now, not always. But usually when somebody is refusing to answer my questions, it's because they have something to hide. But again, I just said not always. Sometimes people don't answer questions because they have some nincompoop marketing director who is too stupid to let them know that putting your side out of the story, if you've got nothing to hide, is always better than acting guilty. So it may well be that this is another case of a company that actually could put its story out there, but isn't. Instead, they have prepared a written statement and will not answer any questions about it. I'm going to read this. It's from Jesse Wilder, the general manager of the Ingleside Hotel. Per our conversation below is the statement that I said I would send via email. If you would like to email your questions, I will do my best to answer them. I tend not to like to operate that way. Please understand this is an active investigation, so there are some things that I will not comment on at this time. On the evening of August 14th, the Ingleside Hotel chose to evict a guest after numerous harassing interactions with our guests and team members. We have policies in place that we enforce with everyone equally in the hotel. These policies help ensure a fun and family-friendly atmosphere and include not tolerating harassment of any hotel guests or employees. The harassment was witnessed by multiple employees and reported to the front desk by multiple guest rooms. The Ingleside Hotel supports free speech. Masks and other clothing items, including those with political messages, have always been allowed. The Ingleside Hotel welcomes guests and groups of all political views. The guest that was evicted made threats against the hotel at the time of eviction. The hotel has received multiple threats since, including a bomb threat, and had to evacuate for the safety of our guests and team members while the Waukesha Police Department investigated. As of approximately 1:30 p.m. on August 15th, that would have been Saturday afternoon, the Waukesha Police Department cleared the hotel for reopening. So, the version of events put out by the hotel was that this guest, Carlin Borsenko, was creating trouble from the moment that she was there, was harassing other guests, was harassing staff members, and so on. Now, she has done a lengthy video. It's about 40 minutes long. She gets very emotional during it, which probably either way is to be expected. Is it possible that I don't know that, is it fair to Karens that this has now become a thing where every bitchy, loudmouth woman who complains is a Karen? Is that fair to somebody whose name actually is Karen? Paul said it is fair to them. Well, how would you like it if we talked about like a Weasley, sissified, dinky type of guy and said that's a Paul? You wouldn't I wouldn't care where you. Yeah, I mean, right now, there's not much you could do to offend me anymore. I mean, look what you have to put up with. What? You have a mother-in-law named Karen. Does she care? No. Does she know about this? Oh. Well, see, you say that she knows a lot of. Well, everybody knows a lot that fit that type, and anyway, it just became a thing. So it may well be that she's just a pain in the ass, annoying woman who complains about everything and came into the hotel and acted up and acted up and acted up. I watch her video. There's no way of telling for sure one way or another. She's clearly very upset. It's also very, very possible, given that many of us have experienced this again and again. I'm just telling you, you put a Trump sticker on your car, you better stay out of certain neighborhoods. We now see that even in neighborhoods that you don't need it, people are telling me their signs are being stolen from some of the most Republican neighborhoods. You've got a Germantown school coach who's fired for daring to criticize Black Lives Matter, an organization that nearly 40% of Americans will come right out and say they consider to be a bad group. There's something, as I've commented for years about the MAGA cap. Now, this is a MAGA mask that drives some people. It's just weird. They're less likely to go crazy if you had a sign that said Trump for president on when you see Make America Great. For the beginning when Trump had that slogan, these caps and that statement drives liberals crazy to the point that they are literally crazy. I think it is very possible that some jackasses at the hotel saw this and acted up. I also think it's possible that Ms. Borisenko started some trouble and was just bitchy about it. The part that I have a hard time resolving is, I've stayed in hotels a lot, and I've seen a lot of people act up and carry on, and I've seen a lot of people blow me away sometimes. They go to the front desk with the most ridiculous demands, and they have a tone. Use that kind of whole Karen kind of thing. The number of times I've heard of somebody being thrown out of a hotel are almost non-existent. And a hotel like this that's got kids that carry out, I just would think that they'd have broad latitude. I have my doubts that she wasn't targeted because she's a Trump supporter. Just given the fact that I would think, short of pulling out knives on staffs, they're not going to throw people out in the middle of the night normally, that there was something about her and maybe but again, I don't know. The fact that the hotel won't answer any questions, though, means that I can't give them the benefit of the doubt. Paul says if she was smart, she would have. Now, she actually addresses that in her video. She was making so many arrangements on her phone to try to catch another room because it's late at night. She wishes she had captured, for instance, this moment when they made her leave the front of the hotel and go out and stand out there on the frontage road. But she's out there trying to scramble to get out of their hotel, and she's also her ride couldn't figure out how to get there. And if you know that area, it's the most confusing interchange in Waukesha County because the hotel is just, you go and you make an odd turn. And I, in fact, just made a wrong turn up there. Where was I going? Oh, try to it's one exit over, but getting to the Marriott is really weird out there. You could see the Marriott from the road, but getting to it is very confusing. There's just a lot of them, and I know why that is. They don't want to have traffic for those roads and entrances other than for the place itself. So she was saying she's going through this. She's got a guy that's coming in from Milwaukee to give her a ride from a long way away. It's the middle of the night. She didn't think of recording it, but I wish she had recorded it. She said she was told by the hotel staff that they don't have their security video available because the cameras weren't working. Well, There's reasons to have doubts about everybody's story. But there are reasons, particularly given the fact that the hotel, if this hotel was in the right, I just think they would have called me Saturday, they would have called me Sunday, they would have called me Monday, or today they wouldn't be giving a prepared statement. And if you have any questions, email them back. However, this story, as I say, like everything else in this world, gets weirder. Would you believe that the number 2 person of the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department was in the hotel that night? I've talked to him about this. And again, I don't give anybody right now gospel. Given that I have seen from high levels of police departments over the last several months degrees of wimpiness that are almost breathtaking as they have been neutered by politicians. I have take everything that anyone is giving me with a grain of salt. And I'm just going to tell the Wauwatosa Police Department right now, whether or not you think you're going to get fired or not, something very, very bad is going to happen unless you start growing some and start enforcing the law, rather than standing there and taking this, because people are feeling very, very, very emboldened. And I understand that you have a disgraceful mayor who is clipping your wings. But when the law is being broken in front of you, if you're a sworn officer, start enforcing the law. And I get that Wauwatosa police are getting it on all sides. They're getting it for being supposedly too aggressive by responding in the fashion in which I think they have clearly been intimidated right now. As I say, I just have a very bad feeling that Wauwatosa is going to blow up into Portland because they will not stop this kind of garbage that's going on. So I throw that in as an aside. I'm going to share with you the sort of by coincidence fact that the number 2 person in the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department was in the hotel while some of this stuff was going on involving Karlin Borisenko. I'll also give you the 4 o'clock hour word.
Yes, I'm down to be a star and make them laugh.
Are those the best 2 jokes they've said in this podcast? That Paul's upon air. What would the bad ones be? They said those are A-list comedians? I'm in the wrong line of work. Paul, if I start going on, I was looking at my own X-ray. You could just story that's boring even by my standards, isn't it? Yeah. News Talk 1130 WISN. Mark Belling, late afternoon show. We've been sharing a story about an incident that occurred over the weekend at the hotel called the Ingleside in Pewaukee. It's a big, huge, long hotel. It's the Old Country Springs. Karlin Borisenko, who has gotten a fair amount of following and a well-known young conservative speaker, was here in the area. She was putting on one of those walk-away rallies and was thrown out of the hotel around midnight Friday night, when Friday night's turning into Saturday morning. She said that she encountered nothing but trouble and attitude since she checked in wearing her Make America Great Again mask. The hotel has said that there were numerous interactions and complaints of harassing behavior by Borisenko. They don't name her, but it's her, during the time that she was there, in which she was complaining to other residents and the hotel staff, and so on. It's certainly possible the truth is somewhere in between. Getting thrown out of a hotel, however, at midnight doesn't happen all that much. Interestingly, the number 2 person of the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department was in the hotel that night. Take a guess. Why do you think he's in the hotel that night? Taking his kids to the, you give money. Why would anybody who lives in Waukesha take, I guess some people do that. But at night and then stay over rather than just do, what? He was at the event she was at. The event was later. No, he works security there. Now I know that in general, a lot of these hotels along freeways that have water parks have used security. Because you can just imagine what it is. And there have been a couple of hotels that have had nothing but trouble at their water parks here in southeastern Wisconsin. I know there's one in downtown Milwaukee that's faced trouble in the past where kids act up, parents are drunk. It's just, they have private security on state. Excuse me. They have their own security and they also use off-duty law enforcement. So, James Gunn was the inspector for the Waukesha Sheriff's Department. Again, he's not on duty other than A cop is always on duty, but he wasn't there during his official hours, and he worked security at the hotel. He said he personally witnessed people complaining that Borisenko was yelling at them and telling them to shut up. And he did personally see that happen. I asked, did you personally see her banging on any doors as they were claiming? He acknowledged he did not see that. I said, do you know anything about whether or not they had any security video? He said, look, we considered it a hotel issue. I was there as private security, but it was being handled by the other security officers, not the on duty that were there. We didn't consider it to be a police matter where there was no police asked to come in. The hotel has the right to kick people out, and we didn't have anything to do with that. But he said that he was there, and he can at least vouch that people were complaining about her behavior. I did ask, and I think the question is legitimate, whether or not the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department's number 2 person should stand by when an unescorted woman without a vehicle is put out onto the street and sent to a frontage road at midnight. He said he was not aware that happened. And again, it's that hotel and the water park goes on forever. He probably was elsewhere and it occurred. I would think that any decent law enforcement officer would not allow somebody to be put out on the street in the middle of nowhere like that without at least keeping an eye on her. But I take Inspector Gumb's word for it that he didn't know that happened. So you have at least from someone who, again, he works for the hotel as a part-time employee doing the security, saying that he can vouch that some people were complaining about what it was that she was doing and starting trouble. But he doesn't have any other information. And as I say, this business of banging on the doors and so on, I'd like to see some security video that would indicate that. As for, was she targeted because she was wearing the Trump mask? Again, there is no way for somebody like me who was not there to know. But I find it plausible because I know this crap's occurring all the time. But that doesn't mean it was happening here. I would generally think, though, if you've got a bunch of kids and a bunch of other people creating a ruckus, that generally speaking, a well-run hotel is going to tell the people that are creating a ruckus to shut up so people can go to sleep. On the other hand, I will grant you also that water parks, it's just a thing where if you're going to run one of these things, you got to accept the fact that a lot of the people that are staying in these rooms don't have any courtesy for anybody else, which is, as I say, unless I'm at there because I have to be, I avoid those kinds of places like the plague. It just, can you imagine me being, I would just sit in my room and try to put something over my ears and not listen to it, but that's the nature of these. Paul said, yeah, I would not have had to be evicted. I would just check out and see if there's, I think boy, they think they have problems now. Wait, I was going to say, wait till the Democrats get here. I think all 4 Democrats are here. By the way, is there a Democrat in the state of Wisconsin who can say more airheaded things than Mandela Barnes? Mandela Barnes said it is terrible that Donald Trump is in Oshkosh this afternoon. Terrible. Terrible that he's in Oshkosh. He thinks it's terrible that when this virus is going on that you would have somebody travel and come to Wisconsin. His own party's convention has people who have traveled to come to Wisconsin. Why is it okay for them to travel and come to Wisconsin but not Donald Trump? For anybody who thinks we have a lightweight as the governor now, I am telling you, if Tony Evers leaves, Mandela is... I could probably, if I was going to give them the talking points, come up with some reason. They could say that Trump is just being a jerk by coming in. I'm sure there's an unwritten rule. You don't come into the state where their convention is going on when it's going on. But to say you shouldn't be traveling to Wisconsin, and I get that most of the Democratic delegates, including Joe Biden, aren't coming, but they do have people here who did travel to get here. Why is it okay for them to travel, but not for Trump to travel? Paul says, what is the combined IQ of Tony Evers at? See, now I would think, Evers was in education. That defines average. Evers, what is 100 average? No, I thought 100 was, I thought that was set on, I don't even know. I actually don't even know. I know that people well over 100 are considered to be, whatever the exact average is, that's Tony Evers. That is who goes into public education. And to become an administrator, you're usually like if 100 is average, like 101 would get you up there. There are very few people that decide that they're going to become public school administrators as opposed to doing quantum physics. So I would say he would be right down there in the middle of the average. Mandela Barnes, the guy who can't pay his rent, who doesn't have a driver's license, who has the state troopers drive him everywhere he goes because he can't pay his parking tickets and all of that. I don't know where his IQ would come in. I'm just saying that if you're going to come up with a shot at Trump, to say that he's endangering people by coming here at the very same week that the Democrats send in all sorts of people to come here for their convention would not be the most sensible thing to criticize someone for. Be like if I got on somebody and making fun of him for having like too big of a nose or something. See? Some people tell me they don't think my nose is that big. It always seems big to me. Don't you think I have a big nose? Do you? Yeah. You're in general ugly. So you're. That's the other people say you're ugly. What guy has ever been upset when they were called ugly? Is there a guy it's maybe like some pretty boy type would be upset by it, but you call a guy ugly. Has it? You ever? No guys care if you're called ugly, do they? No. It's different when you call a woman ugly, I suppose. Yeah. What? Yeah. But what if the woman is ugly? Yeah, it's always, I say, well, that's sexist to say that a woman is ugly. Why isn't it sexist to claim that a man is ugly? Why can't I claim I'm a victim of sexism? It's for the same reason that you could throw Trump support. Can you imagine if this was Frank Nitti on his march at by the way, I'm exactly right. Have you seen his march? That number of cars behind them. The instant the TV cameras leave, I know he's getting in those cars. I know that. Well, he says he's not. He says he's walking the whole way. I don't buy that for a minute. Yeah, like the caravan that was in Mexico that disappeared. Where'd they all go? He got in the cars and that was the end of that. Anyway, if Frank Nitti was marching through Pewaukee and stayed at that hotel, and he went and yelled at people because they're making too much, do you think there's one chance in hell they're going to throw him out and put him on the street in the middle of the night? As I say, it's possible the truth is somewhere here in between. I just think, especially given the fact that the hotel isn't giving any names, answering any questions, but there's video all over these hotels. I want to see all of it. And I want to see who it was that encountered, that did the check-in at the front desk. And I want to talk to that person. And if they aren't willing to do that, again, I suspect they have something to hide. But do I also think that it's possible that Ms. Borisenko, she's like a doctor, she's a PhD, Dr. Borisenko might have been pushy and demanding and was crabby because she traveled? Yeah, I think that that's true as well. But to put her out of there in the middle of it, do I think the fact that she's a Trump supporter and had that on had something to do with it? I think that there's a good case. But do I think this is 100% right on one side and 0% wrong on the other? Probably not. I just will tell you, if this is an African-American supporter of the Democratic ticket and this happened, you would never hear the end of it. Never. So if you're looking for a reason to not check into the Ingleside, aside from the fact that they got a water park in there, now you have that. So you're bad would play these water parks? You 10 years straight, you probably hated all of that then, right? What'd you say? Yeah. Paul says it's horrible. Well, they've redone it since it's been this Ingleside. I should also mention that the owners of the Ingleside also own the Concourse Hotel in Madison. It's a company from Minneapolis. They weren't answering their phone today. Again, not forthcoming with their responses. And if they want to become forthcoming, I've got a lot of questions that I would like to put to them. And I would hope that they would be honest about their responses and not try to be evasive. It's the same hang-up I have with the situation in Germantown, where you get written out answers and not wanting to come clean. I know exactly what happened out there in Germantown, and I know that what happened in Germantown would never have occurred to somebody who posted something from the left that offended someone else. It's the way things are right now, and it's going to continue until those of us on the right speak up and expose it and draw attention to it. So as I say, if the manager of the Ingleside wants to respond to my questions, preferably on the air, and lay out exactly what occurred here and produce any security video that he has, I'd be all ears. But I thought that story is worth sharing. I have linked up it's a long video. The Carlin Borisenko's video is a long one. It is up there on belling.com if you want to see it. And she's emotional, and you could tell that she's alone in terms of how she felt and responded to this. And she's very upset by what happened, so forth and so on. Is it possible that she's just an emotional person, easily upset and provoked this? Yeah. On the other hand, she does these things all over the place, and I don't see her getting thrown out of every hotel that she stays in. I think we would have heard about that. On the other hand, again, could this be a place where, because of the noise and everything else, she was on edge? But that the only thing I'll say against her is, this shouldn't be the case, but if you're going to wear a Trump mask, you're going to hack people off. It's just reality. So you better be prepared for the reaction, which doesn't mean that the reaction is right, but it does drive these lefties crazy. Standing up for Milwaukee, this is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show on News Talk 1130 WISN. I've been reminded by a couple of people that the hotel that we were discussing in our last segment, the Ingleside Hotel, formerly called the Country Springs in Pewaukee, is the same hotel that canceled the booking for the well-known Worldview Conference. That's Brandon Housey, who is a prominent Christian speaker and a conservative organization. They canceled their booking after it occurred because they deem it to be controversial. So there is at least a history for, under the current management, this organization showing bigotry and hostility toward organizations that are right of center, which does not mean that that's what happened to Carlin Borisenko over the weekend. But as I say, lots of people complain about noise in hotels, and very few of them get kicked out. Move on to some other topics here. Without belaboring the point, the Germantown School Board does meet tonight, and whether or not they're going to do anything to address the decision made by the school superintendent and activities director to not renew the contract of a swimming coach because he has posted comments critical of Black Lives Matter or not, I don't know. I have gotten some reaction from some school board members, and this is part of the problem here, that members of school boards, even when they run as conservative, do not understand that the employees of the school system are not on their side. Even in a conservative area, most of the employees in the school system are liberal hacks who need to have an eye kept on them. Not always. Now, not like I'm planning to run for school board in a suburb. I don't live in a suburb. But if I lived in a suburb and I was on a school board, I wouldn't trust anything that one of the school officials told me, because there's a very good chance that that school official is someone who's extremely liberal, because that's what school officials are. If you reach into a goldfish bowl, you're probably going to get a goldfish. It's possible there might be some. What else would be in a goldfish bowl? You don't call it a goldfish bowl unless it was only goldfish, right? What other fish do people put in goldfish bowls? Just goldfish. You're right. Other fish will eat the goldfish, so they only can have a goldfish in there because they'll otherwise be eaten. Yeah, I mean, the goldfish have to be fortunate that somebody invented a goldfish bowl. Otherwise, there'd be none of them left. They all would have been eaten by now, correct? Aren't goldfish carp? I think they are. Aren't they in that family? Well, I know. I think they're in that family. Call Paul with your thoughts on that. He's very interested in hearing what your theories on what type of family the goldfish are in. He would love to hear from you. In fact, call him after the show. And should I give your home phone number so you can take those calls on the... Paul says he hates fish tanks because we have, but in other words, I'm guessing this fish tank was not your decision to get. Is it correct? Yeah, that's like having a cat when it's like it wasn't your idea to have the cat. You never can really warm up to that cat. I know these stories. Again, not every public school employee is bad, and not everyone of them is biased. But if you're going to run for a school board in a conservative community, understand that your primary role is to keep an eye on what's going on there. Otherwise, why run? They're going to make the curriculum liberal. They're going to get away with doing as little work as they possibly can. They're going to do all of the things that public educators are normally going to do. So when I hear school board members saying, well, we leave it to the administration to make personnel decisions. Why are you on the school board if not to make sure that they're not running around out there targeting people because of their conservative viewpoints? Again, I just raised the point. But anyway, without revisiting the entire topic, I've decided to create a project for the audience. Why are you looking at me like you think you're going to be involved in this project? You give me that kind of look whenever I suggest you should actually have to do work. No, this project is actually not involving you. So are you now relieved? Good. I want those of you who live in that school district in Germantown to keep an eye out for every Facebook post or every Twitter post by any employee of the Germantown School District for the remainder of this school year that comes from the left. And I don't mean like just some mild thing. Anything that would offend you. Because after all, we're told that if a coach makes an offensive post, well, this, criticizing Black Lives Matter could offend some people. No kidding. So could any political speech. Since when can we not offend students? I try to offend people every day. How do I do a show unless I state things that lefties aren't going to find offensive? I think that the conduct of many of the Black Lives Matters protesters in some cities has been repugnant. That offends some people. Can't say that. Now, I grant you, the guy in his social media posts made comments that go farther than what I personally would say. So what? A lot of people make comments that go farther than I would personally say. When you see what has come from the left and the amount of venom that people throw out from the left, I mean, the comments that teachers have made about President Trump, that made about Walker, that make about people like me, the comments that they make about Christians, I'd love to find the last time Germantown got rid of any of them for that. So, if I find any Germantown teacher or coach or custodian has made any kind of comments that would be offensive to any of us on the right, I want to see them because I want to see whether or not Germantown is going to send down the activities director with her big axe and the new superintendent that they brought in from west of Madison to start firing and purging people. And I would certainly expect that the school board would demand that that be done unless we're only going to get rid of people who would dare to criticize a Marxist organization whose behavior in some communities has been indefensible. And I said some. The problem with any organization is some members are worse than others. Some talk show hosts are worse than others. Some plumbers are worse than others. Some football players are worse than others. But Black Lives Matter is an organization, and therefore, when its members act up, they should be able to be criticized. Look at the comments that have been made about the NRA, an organization I am a member of. New York State wants to declare it an outlaw organization, criminalize it, and force it to disband. That type of comment is at least as strong as what this fellow said with regard to Black Lives Matter. Yet if some teacher in Germantown ripped the NRA and said that all the members of the NRA are a bunch of boobs, would they fire that guy? I bet not. So that's your project, those of you in Germantown, and I want to hear about it because I'm going to be on this Germantown school board that's going to sit back and allow this kind of behavior to occur. As again, I state, I don't think you should have to agree with everything that someone says. People should, on the right, can go farther than me. People can be out there on the left. I think that in order to get rid of someone for their conduct, unless it's, sexual in a way, clearly you can't tolerate that. But political speech, it's not like there's no limits, but I would say we have to have very broad limits. And the reason I say this is there are no limits at all from the left. None. We're going to get to the Tosa story in a moment. There's no limit that I can imagine right now that can get somebody fired from the left if they're going to shoot off their mouth and rip cops or rip... Nothing. So we're supposed to just sit back and keep taking this again. It's not going to stop, as I've said a million times, until somebody stops it. So you get these people in Germany, they run for the school board and they claim that they're conservative, but the first opportunity that they get that they can actually prove that they are and rein in abusive, out of control school administrators, they go hide underneath the table and say that's not our job. And it is always going to be worse with school board members because the people who are conservative on school boards tend to be very wimpy. Even when you get a few that are 10, I say 10, there's exceptions, but tend to be wimpy, like that guy who ran for the legislature out there in Cedarburg. Got his clock cleaned, Reamer. He said he was a conservative. He passed a giant school referendum, went on the school. Then he turns around and says that he's a conservative. I mean, you have to be. There's a special kind of conservative that thinks that you can raise taxes by tens of millions of dollars, but you still actually are conservative. And I'm sure that he actually thinks he is a conservative. But that's what you tend to get on school boards, people who think that they're conservative but pass up every opportunity to actually demonstrate it and say so. I'll also be laying out there. I'm hearing about it. That's Sarah Leonardo, the activities director. She better not say anything that offends any one of us on the right for the remainder of the year, because if she does, I want to hear about it. I want to hear about it. This business of, okay, well, he said this and somebody isn't going to like it, and it's on the right. That chopping block, this is a guillotine that only comes down on right-wing heads, if you know what I mean. That's a very good comment, isn't it? It's a guillotine that only comes out on right-wing heads. Do I have to explain it to you? Do you know what a guillotine is? Do you understand? I don't know. I think that was pretty funny. You gave it like, it wasn't that good. Okay, turn on the Mayor of Oak Creek show and see the kind of jollies that you're going to get out of that. That'd be his best line of the last 3 months, for crying out. Okay, it's not my greatest, but look at the standard that I have on here. You know, it's like Brad Pitt. Yeah, is it my girlfriend hot? Yeah, I grant you, they're all hot, so you might just say, who's he in trouble with now? Who's somebody... One of the exes is making a big stink with him, right? Actually, I mix up Brad Pitt with who's the other pretty one? Who's the other pretty boy that I mix him up with? No, the other one, younger, superstar. Not Brad Pitt, the other one. The one that did the movies with Matt Damon. Who's the guy that did the movies with Matt Damon? Goodwill Hunting, maybe. I don't know. Who's the guy I'm thinking of? It's not Brad Pitt. 5 biggest male actors in the world right now. Who's the one that was a Jennifer Aniston? Brad Pitt. I see. I'm mixing. Somebody's got to help me out on this. Superstar. Ben Affleck. That's who I was thinking of. Ben Affleck. I mix up the scandals involving Ben Affleck and Brad Pitt. So sometimes I know that was one of those exes is after one of them for something or another. Like, who's the one that was with Angelina Jolie? Was that Ben Affleck or Brad Pitt? Brad Pitt. Are you sure? That was Brad Pitt and not Ben Affleck? Is Ben Affleck the one that was with J-Lo then? Ben Affleck was never with J-Lo? He was, yeah. See, but isn't you? That's what I say. I mix up the two of them. I think you now do too. But Brad Pitt, okay, if I said a movie, I bet, plus they've been in kind of like the same movies, haven't they? They're both the same sort of thing. Who's more talented? Brad Pitt, you claim is. Well, one of them's in trouble with one of these exes, but I don't know which. You think it's Affleck? Yeah, he's got the... Are you sure that it isn't Brad Pitt? Brad Pitt was Angelina Jolie, though, right? I think they're fighting over something. News Talk, 1130 WISN, Mark Belling, late afternoon show. Let's go back in time 4 years. Make it 5 to make it a little less politically obvious. 2015. Imagine if we had actually gotten Israel to back off on establishing settlements that they'd already announced in the West Bank. And imagine that was done because of a deal brokered by Barack Obama. Now, I will grant you that the story, and again, some of these things happened several days ago. I haven't been on since Thursday. Is a few days old, and I'll also grant you that in some news organizations, this did get major attention. I'm not going to deny that the deal between Israel and the Emirates got no attention. However, there was almost no credit given to the Trump administration, even though both sides acknowledged that and I know Trump himself wasn't in there in every meeting, but this was his strategy that he explained to the State Department. The thing that Trump is better at than anything is he understands how to get a deal done. Because we live in an environment where anything Trump does is automatically terrible, and anything that Trump does that actually produces a positive result, we're going to sweep under the rug and pretend it doesn't happen. It does put a special onus on those of us who are conservative commentators to not let these things slip through the cracks. There's been a controversy for 20 years now, more than that, but really the last 20 years in Israel. Israel wants to establish settlements in Palestinian-controlled territories It's problematic because Palestine is still part of Israel, even though it is governed by itself. The Palestinians don't want any more Israelis moving in. Now, to me, on its face, that's just out and out bigoted. Can you imagine if somebody in a suburb of Atlanta said, we don't want any Jewish people to move in here? In the United States, if somebody made the kind of demands that the bigoted Palestinians make, we would obviously consider it to be the ultimate in anti-Semitism. But it's been an issue. The Palestinians don't like the Jewish settlements that have developed in areas that are part of the Palestinian occupied territories or under Palestinian governance. And Netanyahu and the Israeli government are saying we're fed up with this. Interestingly, here in the United States, people who think that we should allow people to come in from Mexico illegally and do nothing, they don't want to even allow people from Israel legally to move into another part of Israel. Still, it's an issue. And it's created tensions for the last 20 years, these settlements that the Israelis want to put. And they've expanded it into the territories controlled by the Palestinians. You can just see how Trump figures this thing through. Like I said, years ago, I read his book. I always thought Trump was sort of a goof. I don't even know why I read the book, other than everybody said The Art of the Deal was a brilliant book. And it is a brilliant book. It's right up there. Who's that Sung guy, that's court strategy and all of that? I mean, it's a great book in terms of understanding leverage and negotiation. And as you know, that's a subject I've always been interested in. But I read it like 2 or 3 years after it's a long time ago. And in it, Trump goes through it. He explains you always, his tactic about what, don't make your best move until the last move and all that. But he also said in order to facilitate the deal, you've got to figure out what the other side really needs and then figure out what do they really need that I don't mind giving up. But his point was you can't make a deal unless you know the other side and their needs more so than the other side does. So Trump's looking at this and he asked himself, what does Israel need? Israel is not recognized by hardly any, it's a double negative, hardly any of the Arab nations recognize Israel. So they are isolated in terms of diplomatic relationships and isolated in terms of access to capital in the Middle East. What are the United Arab Emirates? They are these very, very small, almost like city-states. Qatar or Qatar, depending on your pronunciation, is in the Emirates. Dubai is one of the Emirates. Some of these Emirate nations, which, they have a lot of oil and therefore very, very wealthy with only a relatively small local population. They're also international banking centers. A lot of money flows to Dubai, a little bit less so from a couple of the others. But the Emirates, this small little area strategically at the bottom of the Gulf, incredible amount of wealth. Trump brokers this deal. If the UAE recognizes and establishes full diplomatic relations with Israel, will you drop your plans to put in a number of these settlements? You know what's amazing about this? Why nobody thought of this before? First of all, from the perspective of the Emirates, they're one of the less political of the Arab nations. It's not like they're Iran or Iraq or even Saudi Arabia. Secondly, Dubai and the other Emirates, they'll do business with anybody as it is. Thirdly, in terms of per capita, money per their very small populations, they're in the best position to be able to do a financial deal like this. And finally, fourthly, I've never been to Dubai, but I know all about Dubai. Lots of people who live in Dubai are not Arab, and many are not Muslim. It's a very international place. Qatar less so. I said Qatar is in there. Abu Dhabi is the other really strong of the Emirates. The point is that there's probably going to be less political grief in those countries than if some other Arab nation gave Israel full diplomatic relations. So this is a story that might lead to an easing in tensions. If Israel can establish diplomatic relations with a couple of others, they'll probably give up on some of these settlements. I don't know whether or not long term it's going to lead to anything, but it is again a remarkable deal that has all the hallmarks of Donald Trump figuring out a way to get from point A to point B that nobody else was able to do. And from the perspective of the government of Israel, it's not even just a matter of face saving. It's something that gives Netanyahu something that he really needs by having full diplomatic relations. That means that the next thing is you not only have a means to communicate to the rest of the world, but financial arrangements are probably going to be next in terms of financing and so on, that the Emirates are in an outstanding position to be able to pull off. And from the perspective of the Emirates, who don't have as much clout as they did before because of the general decline in the price of oil globally and the loss of influence that the Gulf states have had in trying to control the oil market, to have some sort of entree to Israel and therefore the rest of the Western world and put themselves in a stronger position than other countries in the Middle East, there's probably something in it for them as well. Going to give you the 5 o'clock hour word in the Sizzling Summer Cash Contest in a moment. Also, still to come on today's program, another one of those counties that is trying to pass one of those draconian health orders that allow a bunch of health inspector goons to knock down your door and lock you up because 2 people shared a straw or something or another. What are you doing in there? Stop standing. You shouldn't be standing like that. What do you mean it's healthy to stand? It's not healthy to stand, is it? No, it's maybe better for your back. It's bad for your feet. Find somebody who stands all day. They all have bad feet. Talk to those people. Well, you need to stand all day. You're standing right now. You think standing's good for your feet? You know, it's good for your rear end. It's not good for your feet. Sitting is bad for your feet, but it's great. They always say, get off your feet. So why are you standing? Where are you standing? Yeah, well, they is whoever I need them to be. It's whoever I need them to be when I can't come up with somebody. No, I think they've said that. So, like, there will be in the nursing home. Your feet will be killing you, and I'm going to have a sore rear end. News Talk 1130 WISN. Mark Belling, late afternoon show. Why this occurred to me now, I don't know, but it occurred to me that I never finished the story from the 3 o'clock hour. Now, you think it would occur to me when I'm telling the story that I haven't finished it, as opposed to my brain kicking in 2 hours later when it should have. It's like hitting the snooze alarm. You know, what you hit the snooze button, or do you just get up? Or do you not even have one? Or your wife just says, you lazy bum, get up. How does it work for you? You hit the snooze. You have a snooze button and you hit it. How long is your snooze set? It's your Apple. You know, you can set that to be whatever you want, but I think 10 is the default, isn't it? I'm not sure. Yeah. It'd be like if it was like 2 hours. See, now that'd be one worth hitting. You think, oh, I got to get up, and then you realize I hit the snooze button and I got a whole 2 extra hours on that. I'm going to forget well, maybe I should. Yeah, I'll end up telling it next month. Now, first, I'm going to give you the Sizzling Summer Cash Contest because people are probably complaining that came out too late the first 2 hours. Good. 5:09, so here's the word for this hour. The word is love, L-O-V-E, love. You have until 6 p.m., nearly an hour, about 50 minutes, to text in love to 200-200. 3 or 4 more winners on WISN over the last several days. In fact, Paul, give me a list. Let's see. Mary Schneider of Sussex was listening to Dan on Thursday. Dan and the winner Friday. Linda Plant of Waukesha. Terrence Bay of Butler listening to Jay this morning. So 3 more winners over the last several days. See if we can get over here. Text in love between now and 6 o'clock to 200-200. You get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio info. Standard data message rates apply on the nationwide contest. Remember me telling that story about Billy Bob Thornton in Fargo and it never got ended? Remember what the story came up in the context of? Well, it came up in the context of police officers needing to establish authority and sometimes coming across sort of as dinks when they approach your car and they encounter you in a situation. And it called to mind, I was mentioning that TV show Fargo, which I'm not going to repeat the whole thing again, but each season of the TV show is a different story, but it's all sort of similar to the story that was in the original movie. Well, Billy Bob Thornton, he's a great actor for one thing. He's just I think he's a better actor than Brad Pitt in these Pretty Boys, don't you? Billy Bob Thornton just as convincing in every role that he's in. And he's, for some reason, just kind of like terrifying, if you know what I mean. Well, he played a character who, in the movie Fargo, and, he's a bad guy. He's a murderer and a con man, and he's an awful person, but you don't really know that. He's pulled over by this cop, and the cop comes over. The cop was Tom Hanks' brother, actually. Remember that? That would have been the first season of the TV show, Fargo. I think that was Billy Bob Thornton was the first season of the TV show, right? And what was the one that, never mind. Ted Danson was in the second season. I mostly remember by the cops. Anyway, this cop comes over to pull him over, and it's a wimpy cop, and he's played by Tom Hanks's brother. And Billy Bob Thornton, the suspect, intimidates the cop and said, essentially saying, you really know you'd be better off going back to your car and driving away, implying that Billy Bob Thornton was going to kill him or do something terrible. And it worked. And that's why police officers will come over and give you that attitude from the beginning. They need to make it clear that they're the baddest guy involved here, that they're not going to be intimidated. And that's kind of why that occurs. And I circle back to the point that I was trying to make. Often when African Americans believe that they are treated with racism by police officers who treat them in a condescending fashion, I think they are unaware that cops tend to come on strong to all people. It's not because of your skin color. Well, they never come on to a white guy like Mark Belling like that. In fact, that is how they come on to almost all of us. And part of the training is to sort of come on with and I'm not saying some don't show excessive swagger, because some do. But if they don't, they have the fear that they've already lost control of the situation by not having exhibited authority. So that was the point that I was trying to end on all of that. I have to try to remember the cops in order from Fargo. When is season 4 coming? It's supposed to have. It was delayed because of the coronavirus. In fact, season 4 has some superstar in it. I'm visualizing him. Name one of the 3 or 4 biggest African American stars there is. Famous black actor, and I'm just sorry I'm blanking on him. I'm not trying to offend anybody here. Not Wesley Snipes, bigger. No, I want to finish this. Who's like the biggest black star there is? I think it is Chris Rock. It's not. We'll look it up. It's not Chris Rock. It's the other one. Really good-looking guy. Just look up Fargo season 4. You'll get the name of him in there. It's not Chris Rock. It's the. I'm trying to think of it. Do you have it? No, is it Denzel Washington? Did you look up Fargo season 4? I'll get it. Let's see. It is Chris Rock. Yeah, when you said it, I should have had it. Chris Rock is going to be in season 4 of Fargo. So that was the point that I was making about police officers establishing command and authority of situations. But anyway, season 4 of Fargo has been delayed forever and ever and ever because they had to stop filming because of the coronavirus. And I think Paul and I will both give it a full endorsement, although you need to go back and see season 3, which it's probably on one of those things, but we never know which network it's actually on. Let's get to the situation in Sheboygan County, which is the latest community now that is facing one of these onerous health ordinances. It's important to give the background in order to advance the story. Following the state Supreme Court decision back in April to strike down the order that was issued by Tony Evers and Andrea Palm, in which the state Supreme Court seemed to indicate that the segment of Wisconsin statute 252 was unconstitutional, the Evers administration encouraged local county health departments to issue their own orders and create their own authority. No one knows, for example, if the order that Evers has issued on a statewide mask mandate is constitutional or not, because unless somebody challenges it in court and no one has, you won't find out for certain. What was ruled, however, by the state Supreme Court was that the broad orders that came from Evers and especially Andrea Palm, his health secretary, were unconstitutional because you can't establish a criminal punishment and declare something to be illegal in the state of Wisconsin without action by a legislative body. Now, that's a lot of words, but that brings us to these county health ordinances. Again, the ruling from the state Supreme Court was that if you're going to enact a law or an ordinance that has criminal sanctions to it or punishment to it, it has to be enacted not just by one elected official signing a piece of paper, but a legislative body has to approve it. So since Evers knows that he can't get the Republican legislature to approve any of these things, he and Andrea Palm have been encouraging all of the counties of the state of Wisconsin to pass their own health orders, but to do it through the front door. Now, what do I mean by the front door? In other words, do it right. Pass it through your county boards. The idea is if the elected body of a county actually passes it, that it would withstand challenge in the state Supreme Court. So what they couldn't do statewide, they've been trying to do locally, and we have 72 counties in the state and about 18 to 20 of them right here in southeastern Wisconsin. It's a lot to keep tabs on, and as you know, these things have popped up here, there, and everywhere else. We managed to get one stopped in Walworth County. They tried in Dodge County. They've tried in a number of our local counties to get these things passed. And the thing with regard to any kind of public policy issue is nothing is ever dead. These are all Lazarus. And for obvious reason. Let's imagine I propose something in Brown County, which is Green Bay, and I lose. There's nothing to say I can't come back in 3 months and propose the same thing. That's the way government works. If you can't pass a law, you keep trying and trying and trying and trying. So for individual citizens who are trying to knock these down, it requires tremendous diligence. Fortunately, and this is one of the upsides of the internet, most local communities put their agendas online. And we have a lot of people out there now that have learned not to trust their media to let them know what's going on. And they're out there prowling around. If some committee puts up an ordinance, there are people out there that are checking these things. And often they are people who they know how to get the word out. In other words, they're well connected on social media and they're just good at doing grassroots stuff. So Sheboygan County rammed one of these ordinances, obnoxious as it is, through a committee last week, and it's going to the county board for discussion tomorrow night. They claim they're not going to approve it tomorrow night. They're merely going to discuss it. I would encourage those of you who live in Sheboygan County to either let your county board member know you want this thing killed now or to show up in person and to speak it down. Now, the county administrator's name is Adam Payne. He does what a lot of people do when they try to buffalo young news reporters. He's saying, well, this language is actually softer than the state statute. In other words, he's implying what we're trying to do is actually make a more reasonable ordinance than we had in the first place. What he doesn't tell you is the state statute was struck down as unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court. So they are trying here to enact something in place of the fact that right now they have nothing. And the ordinance is written in the same way that so many of these others are, by tyrannical local government officials who want to give themselves the authority to bust your door down and take away individual citizen liberties. Briefly from the ordinance, duties of local health officer. The Sheboygan County Health Officer will promptly take all measures necessary to prevent, suppress, and control communicable diseases and will report to the county board the progress of the communicable diseases and the measures used against them as needed to keep the county fully informed or at such intervals as the Wisconsin Secretary of Health may direct. The Sheboygan County Health Officer may do what is reasonable and necessary for the prevention and the suppression of disease, on and on and on. Now, that all sounds wonderful. The problem is, as we know, when you give a health official authority to do something that is reasonable, they interpret that as the authority to do any damn thing they want. Now, we argue about the mask order in the state of Wisconsin. I don't like it because I don't like telling people what to do, and I don't think that the masks do any good. On the other hand, there hasn't been tremendous opposition to the mask ordinance because, and I know why, I've explained this 90 times. Why isn't there much opposition to the mask ordinance? Because Most places, they're not enforcing it. I mean, if these people that were up north, every time they walked into a lodge or a fishing cabin or a bar, had to wear a mask until the moment that they sat down, people would be going nuts. But they're not. It's basically the large chain stores and the companies that have corporate policies and so on. Now, in Milwaukee, you see widespread compliance because, just like in Madison, it's a liberal community where most of the businesses know that if they don't enforce it, somebody's going to go after their licenses. For most citizens, you simply put up with it and you put the mask on and you may not like it. However, without regard to the mask, which is, as ordinances go, something that most people are fine with, but deeply bothers others. And it's another thing if some people just don't even notice that they have the mask on and others are obsessed and they can't stand that they're on. That's all fine. When you see the kinds of things that occurred back in April and May in Wisconsin, where you saw law enforcement officers banging on people's door because the neighbor had a friend over for coffee or had their child was playing with someone. When you see people literally facing fear that you're going to have a health inspector come in and burn their furniture because somebody tested positive for COVID in the home. These are all things that either happened or were threatened. And the only way to stop it from happening is to not give them the authority in the first place. Every one of these ordinances must be killed. We cannot trust that health officials will show restraint. They're all a bunch of Anthony Fauci's. They're all people out there who think that they know best, generally know nothing, armed with master's degrees that merely result in them reading whatever order comes across their table. There are a bunch of people who believe that we should require people to wear masks, which are unproven, but you can't use hydroxychloroquine, which has worked. This is the mentality they have, and they will go to any lengths to enforce their orders. Therefore, we can't give them that authority. Your best opportunity to stop this is when they're in front of an elected body like the county board in Sheboygan County. So if you live in Sheboygan County, you need to let them know that you do not favor giving your county administrator or your county health officer any authority. Even in conservative areas, Ozaukee and Washington County have a joint health department. Her name is Kirsten Johnson, the health officer that runs that agency. She has not been answering my question since I asked her point blank. Did you lobby sponsors of the Ozaukee County Fair to not sponsor the fair in an attempt to kill it? I suspect the reason she didn't answer the question is because she did. County health officers shouldn't be messing around with sponsors of events. This is the sort of attitude that exists when you give these people who consider themselves tyrants the ability to go and stick their elbow in your face. So don't give them the legal ability to throw that elbow around. We would be better off in Wisconsin with no county health. For whatever, I still don't know what purpose they serve. Why do we need a county health department? If I'm sick, I go to the doctor. I don't need a bureaucrat down at county government to intervene in that process. If Paul develops a wart on the bottom of his feet, which is probably going to happen because I see you're sitting over there. Now, why don't you stand up? If you develop a wart on the bottom of your foot, do you believe that you need a county health administrator to tell you how to get the wart removed? What do we need them for? What purpose do they serve? And I think we know what purpose that they serve. To run around and issue a bunch of liberal edicts to breathe down people's neck and make us a less American nation than we are accustomed to being. So yeah, I've been asked by the folks in Sheboygan County, publicize this. I will do so. And I'm going to publicize all of them that come up in each of these counties. And they have to be stopped at first glance. And after they're stopped, the next step that I think needs to be done when all of this dust is settled is zero out their budgets and get rid of all of them. I just don't think they serve a purpose. And most of the purpose that we have seen so far has been destructive rather than constructive. There is no relationship at all between excessively strong enforcement of ordinances and outbreak of the virus. In fact, it seems to me that in the places that have been the most draconian, the virus problem has been worse, i.e. New York, i.e. Milwaukee, etc. Standing up for Milwaukee, this is the Mark Belling Late Afternoon Show on News Talk 1130 WISN. The NBA playoffs weirdly begin today. The Bucks' first game is tomorrow. 4 games today, 4 more games tomorrow. These are all best of 7 series. The playoffs now essentially are the same way they always do it. Bunch of best of 7 series. with the same number of teams in the playoffs, 8 teams per league, that you normally have. The Bucks open tomorrow against Orlando. Weirdly, all games in Orlando, but they're all in the bubble, so there's nobody cheering for the Magic. The Bucks are the number 1 seed in the East, and the Magic are the 8th. You would think the Bucks would have no trouble with Orlando in that series. Today, you have some playoffs that are already underway. Denver beat Utah in overtime 135-125. The biggest mismatch of the playoffs is Toronto and Brooklyn. I mean, Toronto's going to sweep that series. They're going to win every game by a run. Most of Brooklyn's players didn't even come down for the extended thing, and Toronto is probably the biggest threat to the Bucks in the East. Anyway, Toronto is killing Brooklyn right at the end of the game. Now they're up by 24 points. So the Bucks will start playing tomorrow. And tomorrow's game for the Bucks is an afternoon game because they want to put all these games on television. They're going to, I think, try not to have any of them overlap. And they're all played in the bubble. So they play one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. It is not ideal, but it's still better than not. I still think it's better than not playing, don't you? You say, of course. I mean, some people say, I wish they would have just ended it. The only reason I would argue just ending it is if somehow they could have given the Bucks an NBA championship because they had the best record and pulled the plug by now. Same thing with regard to baseball. I do not know why baseball couldn't. Wrigley Field is where the Brewers played over the weekend. Why you couldn't have 4,000 fans there. Why in Miller Park. Just take the season ticket holders, whatever number that is, and give them first dibs and just limit it to 4,000. 4,000 out of 40,000. I mean, what would be the harm in that? I mean, that would be more socially distanced than any event venue that you have in southeastern Wisconsin. 4 and 40,000 in Miller Park. I mean, I could even see just if there were, and I know part of it is they don't want to do the cleaning. Well, restrict the fans maybe to one level. You only sit in the first level or whatever. I don't know why they can't do that. It's almost to the point of being pig-headed, but you have what you have. For those of you trying to get a feel for the whole baseball thing, they show the standings in the newspaper and so on. Remember, the standings don't really matter. All you have to do is end up with one of the best records in there's going to be 16 teams in the playoffs this year in baseball. So whether you win your division or second or third is more or less, if you're above 500, you're going to make it. If you're under 500, you're not going to make it. So the Brewers winning the 3 games in a row down in Wrigley Field, which, while interesting, was most important just because they went in 3 below 500. You don't want to fall way, 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 way below. I did watch all the games. I mean, I said earlier on the program, and I don't know if I finished this thought either, that it was sort of enjoyable seeing an empty Wrigley Field. On the other hand, it would have been even more enjoyable watching their fans have to sit there and watch the Brewers beat them 3 games in a row, each time with the Cubs failing to score in the bottom of the last inning. The game on Friday night was, I thought, the most exciting. It was the one where Freddie Peralta came in with the bases loaded, struck out both hitters that he's faced. Freddie Peralta has struck out 19 hitters in his last 9 innings. Just lights out right now. The flip side to that is I'm a little even though Josh Hader has not given up a run, he's not really striking guys out the way he has in the past, and that might be an indication his pitches aren't quite as devastating. I mean, that final at bat yesterday was 1 million pitches in a row. On the other hand, Freddie's just that box that they put up. Freddie just puts his pitches on the box, and I would say right now he's the most effective pitcher. But the strength of the Brewer team is they have. I can't say I'm following it closely enough, I guess, to make this an absolute. I just can't imagine anybody has a better bullpen than the Brewers, given the fact that none of the Brewers relievers gives up any runs. The weakness of the Brewer team is, and maybe this rectified a little over the weekend, they're just not hitting. I mean, it's consistent. It's team-wide. I mean, I think Urias is now the leading hitter, and that's mostly because he's only played 3 or 4 games, but whole team is hitting under 210. The starting pitching's been okay. The bullpen is brilliant. The hitting just hasn't been there. Fortunately for the Brewers, when they do hit, it's often a home run, so they can get a lot out of a little. Let's move forward here. I can prove that the local school districts that are not opening are insincere about the health risks. I can prove it. Now, this issue has been one in which It's really hard for me as a talk show host to cover every school district that's out there because it's, again, all over the map. Some districts are opening with full in-person 5-day, in-person classes. Some do it 5-day in-person with a virtual option for the parents who want to keep their kids at home. They'll put an online lesson for them, but most of the kids in the school. Others are doing this hybrid where the kids are in some days, but they're virtual the other. And then there are others in which they simply aren't going to operate classes and it's just going to be all online. So this isn't a black or a white situation, and the only way for me to discuss it is to carve out every individual district. And, the people who live in Brookfield don't care what they're going to be doing in Menominee Falls, and the people who know Creek don't care what they're going to be doing in Kenosha, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Before I get to my point of approving the insincerity of this, there is something that I want to establish, and I've said it several times, and I'm not sure that that's sinking in. To the districts and the communities and their school districts that have decided to open full-time 5-day, just understand you're going to have outbreaks of the virus. The reason we know you're going to have outbreaks of the virus is we have outbreaks of the virus everywhere. If you're not willing to accept that, then just stay closed. It's the same point I've made to all these entities that keep canceling everything. College football is an example. This virus isn't going away, I don't believe, at least. Again, as I state with all of these things, I don't know, and none of us know. People speak with too great of an authority on this. But the indications are that this virus is going to be with us for a long, long time, maybe forever. Some people believe in vaccinations, others do not. The new flu shot is now out for this year. I was struck when I looked at the strains of the flu that are in the this season's the 2021. In other words, the one they start now. They come up with a new one every year. And for the people who get it, they generally advise to get it every year. The 3 strains that are in this year's flu shot are the 3 strains that were in last year's flu shot. In other words, they think that my shot that I got last year, and I get the shot, and again, if you don't, that's up to you. They figure it's good for a year. Well, let's imagine they develop a coronavirus vaccine. It's like the flu shot, it's 50% effective, and even then it's only good for a year. That isn't solving anything. Just like with the flu, even though we have a shot, we still have people who get the flu. If you come up with COVID vaccine, maybe you get a shot, but there's still going to be people who get it. It's just a thing that's now there. Back to the schools. So if you're not willing to, so you hear, okay, little Johnny got it, and so did Frank the janitor. If you're going to shut down the schools every time that happens, don't even open. Be like if Paul got it. Well, okay, we're going to go off the air for 5 weeks. If you're not willing to accept that people are going to get it, you may as well not open. Speaking of not opening, is there anybody who's actually seen any signs the Democratic convention is going on in Milwaukee? Have you seen any indication of it? Paul said he saw nothing you've actually seen in the area. I live downtown. I actually think I should try to go. I'd like to make a motion to not nominate Biden. I'd like to move that we nominate Trump. I might be the only guy in the room. I'm guessing I can't get to the security. I'll put on all the masks. On my point, on the lack of sincerity, several districts are doing what Oak Creek Franklin is doing. Now, you've got to follow this closely because it proves how phony and Oak Creek Franklin is a community that has decided not to open at all. Many of these districts did the parental surveys. They surveyed the parents. What do you think? And everywhere that I ever saw, the parents voted to have the kids go back to school. I think they thought the parents were going to vote the other way. Oh, we can't do it. We can't take the risk. In fact, it's been just the opposite. There's been overwhelming support for getting the kids back in school, including at Oak Creek Franklin. They took the survey from the parents and they threw it in the garbage and they said, screw you. Our crybaby, lazy-ass school teachers don't want to teach. To hell with the parents. Now, they didn't put it in those words, but that's essentially what they're saying. So even though some communities, including neighboring communities, are going to have their kids back in school, in the Oak Creek Franklin district, they're starting virtual. And again, the point that I make on the starting virtual is, what is the criteria you are going to... They never say this. What's the criteria by which you open? I have seen this on nobody's orders, Evers' mask order. What is the criteria by which you don't have to wear the mask? What is the criteria? Give me the number. Not the, well, look, there's it. What's the number? If you get to a point where the number of hospitalizations in your district is below 2, is that it? If in Oak Creek, Franklin, you have fewer than 20 new cases, 20 cases going on, or 50 or 100, what's the number? What is the criteria? They never establish it. Because I guarantee you, when you get to October 15th, the same people who don't want the schools open now won't want them open then. Which is why you just may as well go ahead and do it, because the people who don't want you to open will never want you open. They will not want to open next year. Now, my proof about the insincerity. I have an email that was sent today to parents of families in, and because Oak Creek Franklin has a hyphenated school district, it's weird. Franklin, there's a Franklin school district, but there's also an Oak Creek Franklin school district. The people who live on the east side of Franklin are in Oak Creek Franklin, but it's a small number. Oak Creek Franklin is almost entirely Oak Creek. Almost everybody who lives in Franklin goes to the Franklin School District, but it's called Oak Creek Franklin. I forget where the dividing line is, but the far eastern portion of Franklin is in the Oak Creek District. Dear OCFSD, it almost says like Dear OCD, which would be parents. Now listen to this. We recognize and understand the challenge that beginning the 2021 school year with instructional programming occurring outside of our schools has presented to many of you as you look to balance work responsibilities and childcare needs. In trying to help, Youth Program has worked with the Oak Creek Health Department to safely expand its services and staffing to offer school day camp for kids in grades 4K through 8 during the time period in which instruction is provided remotely. Do you understand what I just said? For the parents for whom daycare is an issue, they're going to let their kids go to school and do their online learning in the school. Why is it safe for the kids to go to the school and do the online learning in the school, but it's not safe for the kids to go into the same school and actually learn? So they're going to take the kids and send them to the very schools they're not allowing them to go to for school, and go and sit there and essentially be babysat while in the exact same school that they would be sitting in if there were classes. The only difference, of course, is that the daycare operation will not be provided by a unionized school teacher. It'll just be somebody who's overseeing the room. Which proves again that what this is all about has nothing to do with the safety of the kids. It's all because Oak Creek Franklin has some lazy-ass school teachers who are too chicken to go into work, or have such control of the school board that they're able to con them and to continue to overpaying them their salaries while they sit on their cans rather than go to work. If you can have somebody sit in the same room and oversee the kids to make sure they're not misbehaving, you can have a teacher in that same room teaching classes. This decision is occurring in other communities as well. This proves that this has nothing to do with public health, and it has everything to do with facilitating the desires of teachers that are either too lazy or too cowardly to go to work. As for my comment on cowardly, our society is filled with people who have occupations who are reporting to work every single day. And they're not sitting here scared to death of getting COVID. If you don't feel that public school teaching is essential enough that you should be willing to run the risk of getting COVID, then go get one of the jobs that is allowing you to sit on extended unemployment for the next year and a half. The police officers that we demean and mock, one of whom we might be firing this afternoon, they're all reporting to work. They're willing to bite the COVID bullet. So down there in Oak Creek, just so you know what a joke of a school board you have, the same school district that says you can't send your kids to school is allowing you to send your kids to school to do their online learning when they're in the school. You can't make up any of this. I mentioned the possible firing of a police officer. Right now, as we speak, the Tosa Fire and Police Commission is voting to decide what to do with Officer Mensah. There are protesters like crazy that are over at the building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think they're going to do with Officer Mensah? They're going to fire him. No kidding. Has there been any sign yet from any public official in Wauwatosa of any backbone or integrity? None. And what has this gotten them so far? What it got them over the weekend was a massive protest at the mayor's house, out of control, unbelievable taunting and mocking by protesters. Despite a statement from the mayor earlier that they were going to enforce city ordinances, they enforced none of them. Police officers being forced to put up with all sorts of abuse and obnoxious behavior and standing around like they're like vampires without the fangs, except vampires don't have it. Is it vampires that have fangs? Then that was a good one. They're like the cops are standing around like vampires without the fangs. I mean, if you're not, why stand up and say you're going to enforce the ordinances if you're going to allow disorderly conduct to go on like crazy without starting to throw some of these people into, and it would have been perfect on a Friday night, throw them into paddy wagons and have a judge disappear until Monday and let them sit their butts in there, charge every single one of them with misdemeanor disorderly conduct so they all have records, and finally for once indicate that we have some control of our community. But as long as Wauwatosa is run by Dennis McBride, you are going to see the cave-in. They'll start by firing Mensah. They're going to go, now that they're protesting at his house, it took him one day to back off at his curfew. You can protest after 8 o'clock. It's right back to where you were in the beginning. You can't expect a jellyfish to suddenly have a backbone. That's good, too. That's better than my vampire without the fang. See, a jellyfish is a species that doesn't have a backbone. Expecting Mayor McBride and the city council to suddenly sprout a backbone is like expecting me to sprout wings and fly home in my arms around today. Should I come up with more analogies or have they served the point? Quit while I'm ahead. Yeah, that's a good point. News Talk 1130 WYSN, Mark Belling, late afternoon show. Yeah, as I was mentioning, the Wauwatosa Police and Fire Commission is meeting right now, in fact, to discuss the recommendations on dealing with Officer Joseph Mensah, who is the police officer who has not been found guilty of having done anything wrong, but has shot and killed 3 individuals during the line of duty. I believe it is highly likely that the Police and Fire Commission is going to vote to fire him. He was suspended pending moving forward with today's. Now, it's possible they're going to try to kick the can down another month and say we'll deal with it next month and next month and next month and next month. Next month. I suspect that the long run is that they're going to make the decision to simply fire him because Wauwatosa has shown from the beginning an unwillingness to stand up to people who have made demands, even though those people who are making the demands are largely outside the community. And B, even though the people that are making the demands are insincere in their demands. Now, I'm going to make a point about this and then share a story. The story weirdly has to do with harness racing, a subject that you would think I would know a lot about. A lot of people that are into horse racing are not into harness racing and vice versa. It's odd, but it's true. Some are into both, many are not. But I'm going to relate it to this story, and I think it's going to be a relevant example. My proof of the insincerity of this was there was virtually no controversy or criticism over the first shooting that Officer Mensah was involved in. There was discussion about the Jay Anderson case, the sitting in the car, etc., but very little controversy over that. Then you had the situation at Mayfair. We all know what the problems at Mayfair have been. Mayfair, even several years ago, had to establish a curfew. People come into the mall and start smashing things up, scaring people to death. And it happens over and over and over again. Often it's a flash mob kind of thing. There was a report, this is long before George Floyd or any of that, of a disturbance at Mayfair, and the Tosa police responded. A group of people were running toward the mall. One of them had a gun, and it was out. As it turns out, we didn't know it at the time, but as it turns out, it was a stolen gun. Also, as it turns out, he was 17, meaning he is not legally allowed to carry a gun in Wisconsin anyway. Even if the gun was not stolen, at 17, he's not legally allowed to carry it. When Officer Mensah ordered him to stop, he turned and shot at him. That's when he was killed. Had Officer Mensah done nothing and allowed him to continue to run, we have a guy with a stolen gun who is running into the mall. Now, I grant you Officer Mensah didn't know this at the time, but we have come to learn that he had 36 bullets with him and an extended magazine. Why are you running toward the mall with that number of bullets and an extended magazine? There are certainly reasons to believe that he was intending to commit mass murder, and Officer Mensah's shooting in response to the shot taken at him saved many lives. We don't know that, but it's a hypothesis that certainly makes sense to me. When that shooting occurred that day, and I recall I was on the air that afternoon, there was no criticism of the shooting at all. None. Nobody brought up Joseph Mensah or these three shootings until after this George Floyd thing in Minneapolis. This is totally insincere. It is an invented controversy over this cop. If there were reasons to question these shootings, they would have been raised before the George Floyd. What happened in Wauwatosa was this. Demagogic, left-wing, anti-police representatives of the community that band together under the name of Tosa Together decided that they were going to take the opportunity to try to get fired a number of people they don't like, including the police chief. So after the George Floyd situation, their leader, Alderman Heather Kuhl, called for a series of hearings on the police department in Wauwatosa. This was a signal to protesters from outside Milwaukee to come in and complain because they realized that Wauwatosa was essentially inviting them in. And there's been no turning back ever since this. Heather Kuhl and the other Tosa Together crowd, including Robin Vining, who is a member of the state legislature, and a colleague of some of the people that have been protesting at homes in Wauwatosa, like Jonathan Brostoff, state assemblyman from Milwaukee, like David Bowen, state assemblyman from Milwaukee, have been fueling this. Of all the communities in Wisconsin to go after and target the police department, they've picked Wauwatosa. Now you say, well, that's the only one that has a cop that killed 3 people. That's true. But they weren't protesting them after any one of those 3 killings. It was months after the Mayfair shooting before anybody raised an objection. They picked Wauwatosa because they realized in Wauwatosa they had a community that was not going to enforce the law. And from the moment that they got there, the police in Wauwatosa were under instructions to allow the protesters to break every traffic law and every organized law that we have. They march up and down North Avenue, they march here, they march there. Disrupting traffic, interfering with the flow of things. Not getting a sufficient reaction, they next demanded that Mensah be fired. So the mayor and the city council step forward and say, well, we're going to recommend that he has to leave the department, and the Fire and Police Commission suspend him. I think when they did this, well, that'll buy time. The protesters will be happy. This is the naivete that liberals have. Protesters are never happy. When they see weakness like this, they're going to come again and again and again. So then you have the situation a weekend ago in which Officer Mensah's home was shot at. A member of the Wisconsin State Assembly, David Bowen, a liar, claims that Mensah pulled the trigger himself. I'm calling Bowen a liar. That was a lie. So the mayor of Wauwatosa gets, we're going to start enforcing our ordinances. And then what happens on Friday night? Right after he said we're going to start enforcing our ordinances, they don't enforce any ordinances. The protesters go right to the mayor's house. We know what happens when you go to the homes of liberal politicians. They cave and cry and whine. And you had a standoff that went on for hours. If they fire Officer Mensah, the protesting will continue even more. The next thing they'll demand is the firing of Officer Weber, and it will not stop. The only thing that will stop this is the thing that stops it everywhere else it's stopped. If they are willing to empower the police officers to start enforcing the laws of Wauwatosa, including, you don't get to stand in the middle of the street. You don't get to block traffic. You don't get to stand in people's yards. And you don't get to engage in disorderly conduct. And haul them in every single time, it will begin to end. Now, I posted on Belling.com. It's a social media video, so I don't know how long it's going to be up before somebody takes it down. It's very long, and I don't want you to watch it now. But it comes from one of the protesters, and it shows just how vulgar. It's about an hour video. It's 1 hour of these protesters screaming in the faces of police officers, 3 feet away from them, max. Screaming the F word, every vulgar word you can scream in their face over and on and on, nonstop. With the police officers standing there like they're all on Quaaludes, showing no response. Since when can you walk up to a cop and say this for 3 seconds without getting arrested, much less an hour? Now, it's not the fault of the individual officers. They are clearly under orders to do nothing about this. And I don't even think it's Chief Weber's fault, because I believe he's been directed not to make mass arrests. This is, by definition, disorderly conduct. If a cop sees me jaywalking, which essentially is what all these people are doing, they're standing in the middle of the street, and I respond by, you bleeping, you're a piece of you. Do you think there's a chance that me or any other white guy's not going to be in cuffs? So you have these poor police officers, all of whom are standing there armed, having to sit there and take this. And what's clearly going on is they are being taunted because these protesters want one of them to respond. And it's not going to change until the community of Wauwatosa gets off its collective can and grows up and starts demanding that it run itself like an orderly community. Or you're Portland. Now, I admit that when you do show strength, you get yourself fired. The Milwaukee police chief was fired because he used tear gas to end the disturbance that went on McKinley Avenue in the middle of the George Floyd protest, which, by the way, worked. The protesters essentially dispersed and moved on, and that was the end of their aggressiveness. Wauwatosa wants to get these people off the street. They have to say, you can't just stand around on the street for hours on end and block traffic, and you can't go standing in people's yards. You can't grab bullhorns and scream at the top of your lungs and say demeaning words. You can't throw vulgarities out there. You can't swear. You can't do these things. None of the rest of us can do it. You can't do it either. So you're going to disperse it. If you don't disperse, we're going to tear gas you. And if that doesn't work, we're going to round you all up and we're going to arrest you. You do that 5 nights in a row, this will begin to end. But Wauwatosa doesn't have the guts to do it. And that's why they're in the situation they're in. So, Officer Mensah gets sacrificed at the altar of political correctness, and after that it'll be another one and another one and another one and another one. And the next time we have an incident in Wauwatosa where a police officer feels the need to pull out his gun, that officer, either he or she is going to consider, do I want to shoot? Should I just let myself get killed? Should I run away and hide in the car? Should I not protect the public, that knowing that when I try to do my job, my community will sell me out? If you were a Wauwatosa resident, would you count on Dennis McBride, the mayor, having your back? Or would you assume he would sell you out the way he sold out Mensah? I said I had a solution to this, and I'll offer it in a moment. But first, we'll give you the 6 o'clock hour word. Sizzling Summer Cash Contest. Where's my word? There it is. Money. Remember Don Money of the Brewers? Remember him? Yeah, mostly played third base. Money. Who'd he come here from? I think the Phillies. I might be wrong about that. That's way back in the 70s. Don Money. Well, not Don Money. It's the word is what? Some poor idiot's going to say. No, just put in money. Money. You put in anything additional, the computer's going to read it wrong. Text money to 200-200 anytime between now and 7 o'clock. You get a text confirming entry plus iHeartRadio info. Standard data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest. I think it can make Officer Mensah a fair amount of money. And I think we can send a message to the leaders of Tosa, and for that matter, the residents of the community that is standing by. You talk about zombies and just allowing themselves to become a chaotic city of disorder in which they're shoved around by a bunch of people who don't even live there. I'll try to help out. In the same way that President Trump facilitated the deal between Israel and the UAE, I'll facilitate a deal here in Wauwatosa that will send a proper message and make that community pay for the despicable way in which its leaders are conducting itself. You elect people like Jason Coforth, don't turn around and respond when you find out that your alderman is a wimp. When you elect Dennis McBride as mayor, don't turn around and be surprised when you see that the mayor doesn't have the guts to enforce order in his community. Remember the mayor big talk on Thursday? We're going to start enforcing the ordinances. You watch that video once the show is over, what went on in Wauwatosa, and you tell me that they're enforcing any ordinances in that community. Paul said they need to do what they did at the bike rally in Sturgis over the weekend. Well, or just ask yourself what would happen if this was done in another community, similar, if not similar size, similar demographic. I mean, imagine that a cop had to shoot somebody in Grafton, and that this kind of crap went on in Grafton. What would the Grafton police stand there and allow this kind of disruption night after night after night after night after night after night, or the residents demand that there be a response and that they put an end to it? We don't know how any of these communities are going to respond, but I think that if you would have stepped back and asked, find a community that is going to essentially do this the worst possible way you could do it, no one would have been surprised that it would be Wauwatosa. Particularly when there was very little criticism of Heather Kuhl when she essentially signaled, when she and Robin Vining signaled and said, hey guys, come on here and tear us up. We'll roll over for you, which is precisely what anti-police public officials want to do in the first place. Paul says that we need the Sturgis bikers to come in and get rid of them the way they got rid of Antifa. So you say you want us to recruit the bikers from Sturgis to come in Wauwatosa and do what we're not allowing the police department to do? Well, that does kind of remind me of what happened though when the Rolling Stones hired the Hells Angels to patrol Altamont. Yeah, so boy, that's a dated reference. You know about the Hells Angels in Altamont? They hired him to be security. Hells Angels went in and killed everybody. Yeah, Mick Jagger, calm down, everybody. That's the Dennis Mick Jagger calming down Hells Angels is Dennis McBride trying to calm down the protesters out there. Well, can't you just calm down? We're being wimpy liberals like you wanted us to be. News Talk 1130 WISN. Mark Belling, late afternoon show. Presuming that Officer Mensah is fired, he's going to have quite the case for wrongful termination. You can even make the case that he's the victim of racial discrimination, given the fact that virtually everybody in the Wauwatosa power structure is white, and they're targeting a black police officer for laying his life on the line and trying to protect a predominantly white community. The problem, however, for a lot of these cases is the lawyers are either going to work on a retainer, meaning they're only going to take the case if they can get a big percentage of the amount of money that's going to be won, or the client has to pay the bills himself. Now, it is true that the unions, and Officer Mensah is a member of a police union, you do get representation that way. But there's a limit as to how far you can go on that. I believe he needs to personally file lawsuits against members of the Common Council and Fire and Police Commission because they are personally, I think, discriminating against him. How do you do this? Well, I'm going to tell a story that comes from the world of harness racing. Just happened last week. It's kind of a weird story. As you know, in horse racing, harness racing and horse racing, there are cheats. They cheat with drugs. People who are naive respond to this in the same way that people responded to the steroid cheats in baseball and the other sports. Can't you just do drug testing? Very few people who cheat with drugs are dumb enough to use drugs that they test for. And the people in horse racing who cheat, by and large, cheat with drugs that we don't know that they're using. They're often synthetic drugs. They're often designer drugs. They're created in a lab, and they're created for the purposes of being something that no test is ever going to catch, because you can only test for what you know exists. So the worst cheats are the ones who tend to get away with it. Anyway, they caught a guy who was a trainer in New Jersey in harness racing for cheating. And what usually happens when they catch these guys, they suspend them for a year or two, and somebody else trains the horse in their name, and that's the end of it. Here's where the story got a little interesting. There was a guy who was betting on the races, one of the races that this guy was cheating in. He ended up losing like a pick six or something, but it was several $100,000 that he would have gotten had his horse won, and instead the cheater's horse won. He sued the trainer who was cheating, saying, look, your cheating cost me all this money I would have won on my bet. As it turns out, they settled the case out of court, and the trainer agreed to pay a judgment. Now, what does this have to do with the police officer? Normally, most lawyers weren't going to take a case like the one that the gambler brought forward, because it would seem like a long shot in order to win. Lawyers don't want to take cases in which they don't think that they can't get a reasonable chance of winning, because most of these cases, the lawyer takes about 1/3 on a contingency. Unless you have a client who has deep enough pockets to pay you up front. But if you're the client that's suing to try to recover money, why pay a fortune of it to the lawyer up front anyway? Here's what happened in that case in New Jersey. Somebody else paid the legal bills. You know who paid them? You thought about it long enough, you could figure it out. PETA paid them. I don't think much of PETA, but one of the things that they're on is all these people that cheat with drugs in sports involving animals. PETA paid the legal bills of the gambler that was suing the trader that was cheating. So the gambler was able to bring his lawsuit without having to worry about coming up with any money out of pocket. And because PETA has almost unlimited resources, the trainer that was being sued, the treater with the jugs, he figured, I got to settle. I'm going to be bankrupted on my own legal bills. There's been a GoFundMe campaign for Officer Mensah. We've got to fatten that thing up with as much money as possible so that Officer Mensah can sue Wauwatosa. And for those of you in Wauwatosa, you're not going to mind. You just spent $200 million in a school referendum. You spend money like crazy. So, in order for Officer Mensah to go somewhere else and start a life anew with this thing chasing him around and killing the 3 people and so forth, I'm thinking 5 or 6 or 7 million might be enough to do it. And I think you residents of Wauwatosa who have shown such gutlessness in not backing this police officer and instead electing people like Heather Kuhl and Robin Vining who go out there and demonize courageous people, you should be more than willing to spend 5, 6, 7 million for this to go away. And when the next person with a gun tries to commit a crime in Wauwatosa and that person gets shot, give that guy 5, 6, 7 million too. In other words, we need to kick in some money, all of us, to make sure that Officer Mensah can get a really, really, really good lawyer so the people of Wauwatosa can pay through the nose for treating an African-American police officer who, despite COVID, despite the slings and arrows of being a cop, despite the fact that people are shooting at you, went in there and loyally did his job every single day, then has protesters go to his house and fire a shotgun through the window and still gets no support at all from the community he served. And I would think the people in Wauwatosa will be just fine paying this because they don't seem to be bothered by any other type of tax increase that they pay in that community. It's 627 at News Talk 1130 WISN.